and turned it into Crazy Town because basically the Russians hadn't infiltrated anything. They had a few spies here, but that was about it. And and even the Julius and Ethel Rosenberg thing was, that was Donald Trump's old buddy, the lawyer whose name is escaping me right now.
Cohen.
Yeah.
Cohen.
Yeah. Roy Cohn,
Roy Cohn.
Yep. And who was also involved with that committee. So let me think about that, RJ, and let me do a little research into the history of that, because I think you might be onto something.
Wasn't there also a committee, at least a partial committee or something, formed after the attempted coup on Roosevelt?
There was, and Roosevelt shut that down after 3 weeks. They held hearings for either 2 or 3 weeks, and Roosevelt shut it down because it was getting highly politicized, and he also was concerned that they might actually trigger another movement to assassinate him or to kidnap him, as Smedley Butler was hired to do, or they tried to hire him to do. RJ, let me look into this, and thank you for getting the brain cells going. Bill in New Rochelle, New York. Hey, Bill, you've got the last minute of the show. What's on your mind today?
How you doing, Tom? I was just wondering if there's any way that these states that are suppressing the vote all around the country, if there's any way that Congress can stop them from participating, especially in the Electoral College, if they're suppressing the vote.
There is no law that I know of that would facilitate that. H.R. 1, the For the People Act, now it's Senate Bill 1, SB 1, would eliminate most of the vote suppression tactics that they're using. It would outlaw most of those tactics and would guarantee a universal right to vote in the process, or, it's kind of one and the same. So there's not a way to kick them out, basically, of the Electoral College or prevent their votes from being counted. There is a way.
Kick them out of the United States either, right? There's no. They can secede, but we can't toss them, right?
That's true. That's true. And even secession is pretty much never going to happen. I mean, America has become sufficiently left-right integrated, and there are secession movements in New Hampshire and Oregon and California.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Club's creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. "He does not want this cash," the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Coke's products without ever seeing Coke's name attached. Coke refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Coke is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Coke makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Cokeland, by Christopher Leonard.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. A big show today. In the second hour, we're going to be talking about this whole commission thing. And we're also going to get into, actually, I think that what's happening right now is that the war for the election of 2024 is being fought right now. And it has to do with whether we're going to investigate reality. We'll get into that in detail in the second hour. And a bizarre, crazy alert. Joe Biden faked his drive. Really? His electric car drive? We'll get to that. And why dark money doesn't want H.R. 1. And I'll share the poster child for that with you. But our first hour, it's Middays with Mark. Wednesday, first hour, Congressman Mark Pocan, representing the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives, member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, a longtime friend of our show here, on the line with us taking your calls for the hour. And Congressman Pocan, welcome back. It's great having you with us. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, well, thanks, Tom. Sounds like you got a great show today. Part of it is just what you're going to be talking about in the second hour, which is this commission that we're forming, completely split Dem-Republican equal numbers. There was a deal with Republicans, and now, of course, Republican leadership wants to go back on the deal because they don't want to actually talk about the truth of what happened January 6th. It doesn't fit their narrative, just as you said. There's a different battle going on. And then just dealing, unfortunately, with what's going on in Israel and Palestine. It's really heartbreaking that we can't get a ceasefire yet. And I think we have to demand a ceasefire as a country. And I know Joe Biden's had a more stiff conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu, but members of Congress, we have a letter that'll be released today from the House that'll have a significant number of members of the House also demanding a ceasefire. But lots going on. Are you going to get any Republicans on that, or is there even an effort? Is this becoming an entirely partisan issue? Everything is a partisan issue with Republicans, right? I mean, we had an agreement on a bipartisan commission, everything they asked for, and now they're not accepting that. And in this issue, unfortunately, I think it's going to be hard to get Republicans to sign on, even though it should be simple. You're asking for a ceasefire, an end to hostilities, an end to the killings by everyone. And how that could be partisan, I don't know, but trust me, Tom, in Washington it will be. Yeah. Let me just play for you, if I may, apropos of this, what was the introduction to the BBC World News, their podcast. I listen to this every night. And just their opening story, I'm just going to play it off my phone into my microphone here, if that works, because this is how the world is talking about this.
Global news podcast from the BBC
Can you hear
World
that?
Service with reports and analysis from
Okay, here
across
we
the
go.
world.
It's going to open in
Latest
just a
news
second.
7 days a week. BBC World Service podcasts are supported by advertising.
This is the Global News Podcast from the BBC World Service.
Lead story.
I'm Nick Miles, and in the early hours of Tuesday, the 18th of May, these are our main stories. The United States has, for the third time in a week, prevented the UN Security Council from issuing a statement calling for an end to the violence between Israel and the Palestinians.
There we go. 3 days in a row that we've blocked the United Nations. I didn't know that. I mean, I hadn't seen that on U.S. News at all. Yeah, this is one where you've seen increased conversation in Congress from a perspective that you haven't seen recently. Last week, we led 10 of us on the floor. In fact, we had more people who wanted to do it. We ran out of time
to talk about this from a different perspective, a perspective of protecting human rights and life and dignity for everyone in the Middle East. And, we've been trying to convince the president to be more aggressive in asking for a ceasefire. Ceasefire should be simple, right? Let's just end all hostilities. But we have to remember, the things didn't start 10 days ago with rockets coming out of Gaza. They started weeks ago, months ago, years ago, decades ago, when illegal settlements keep taking away people's land, when there was an attack on a mosque during Ramadan just a few weeks back, when we continue to demean the dignity of the lives of Palestinians, when you have roads that have giant walls down the middle, and Israelis drive on one side and Palestinians on the other side. That looks a little bit too much like an old South Africa. I mean, those are the things that we're now starting to talk about more aggressively, and I think we're having an impact. So that's what we're hearing from real people that are outside of Washington, D.C., and that's what I think you're finding, especially some of the younger members really vocalizing. And we are trying to have a different policy. Yes, Israel's our friend, but just like if you had a friend who every night after work got drunk and got in a car and risk people's lives, you say something to your friend. And in this case, a friend that we give help to, things like the Iron Dome, which I support because it takes out a missile. It should de-escalate any violence because of that. But instead, they still respond 20-fold in killings. That's not what we intended for this. And we just need to have a broader, better conversation about peace in the Middle East, because what I don't want to happen, Tom, is American men and women having to go there someday and risking their lives because we didn't deal with things now.
Right. And 3 days in a row, every single day, we're the only country that has blocked this resolution in the UN Security Council. That just blows my mind. But anyway, I'm getting repetitive here. Shall we pick up some phone calls?
Yes, absolutely,
okay.
Tom.
Congressman Mark Pocan with the Congressional Progressive Caucus and representing Wisconsin on the line with us, taking your calls at, you all know the number. Russ in Hickory Hills, Illinois. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Pocan, for taking my call. And, Tom, I wanted to ask.
Whoa. Russ, I'm sorry, that was entirely my fault. I'm back in the studio and I haven't gotten used to my mouse yet. Call right back. Rob in Mount Iron, Minnesota. Rob, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Congressman Pocan, Tom, thank you for the time. You might remember a couple of years ago a situation called Benghazi. Over and over and over and again, it was where Republicans wanted it investigated. Why is it now, when people attack America, they do not want to be able to take and investigate?
Yeah, Rob, you're exactly right. I mean, they're hypocrites, right? I mean, we had an attack on the Capitol. If we just took everyone's speech that day, every Republican from Kevin McCarthy to senators, everyone that day said what was happening was wrong, and they were putting the blame at the feet of Donald Trump. But now that they realize the cult still is making Kool-Aid, they're afraid to challenge, Donald Trump. And even though all he has is a blog now, they're still, wearing Depends around here because they're afraid that he's going to say something and like Liz Cheney, cast them into somewhere that they don't want to go. It's just pure cowardice. So we need to know as a nation what happened. We need to have a resolution for this. We can never have it happen again. It hadn't happened for 200 years prior. It shouldn't happen again. And the fact that they're not willing to do that, I think we will have a lot of Republican votes, though, today. But the fact that leadership is still afraid of Donald Trump, and it's just sad. And you're exactly right, Rob. They're hypocrites.
We just have 45 seconds. Congressman, in my second-hour rant in my op-ed today, I'm calling for, if we can't get a commission that actually has teeth, and that's not going to happen if it's 50% Republicans, a special prosecutor or independent counsel. Are any of your colleagues talking about anything like that?
So what we've been talking about is every committee still has the right under their jurisdiction to do hearings on this. That is not precluded by this commission. The whole idea was to have a bipartisan commission so that the results might be looked at by rational people in a better way. But let's face it, rational people and Donald Trump right now don't exist is something you could have together. So committees will still do their work, and you'll still see other investigations happening. This is one that was intended to do to have more credibility, but unfortunately they're trying to kill that.
Yeah, I think we need an Archibald Cox, Leon Jaworski.
Raise the level.
Yeah, who was the guy who went after Bill Clinton? I'm blanking on his name.
Ken Starr?
Yeah, Ken Starr. I mean, we need a Democratic version of Ken Starr. Okay, we'll be right back with more calls for Congressman Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
15 minutes past the hour on the Thom Hartmann Program. Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back in just a moment. And welcome back. Omar in Herndon, Virginia. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Sir Thom Hartmann and Lord Mark Pocan, thank you both for taking my call. My question is about the infrastructure bill. How soon can we get that passed? And the second question I have regarding some of the congressmen that were helping some of these terrorists on January 26th. Is there any update on those congressmen? Are they facing any disciplinaries?
Yeah, Omar, so that second part, I think that's what we're waiting for this commission, and this has been a long time waiting. We've talked about this a lot on the program. So I hope that we will still move forward with it, because I think this commission will move forward as long as the Senate goes along. If not, we will find another vehicle to do that. To your first question, Republicans were waiting for them to seriously come to the table. They put out another little mini plan on infrastructure to say they want to do infrastructure. They fund it with a bunch of existing funds they're going to steal from other things. I said, why don't they just have a bake sale at it while they're at it, right? That's about the level of seriousness they put out there. But at some point, if they don't come to the table, that doesn't mean we're not going to serve the meal. We're not going to make people go hungry. We're going to deal with this because we need to, both for the economy and for our nation's infrastructure. So, it's very open. We want them to work with us, but if they don't, that doesn't mean things won't happen. We will use reconciliation.
Congressman, to Omar's second question, I have read several media reports, but I can't say that I'm sure that any of them are credible or solid. In other words, I haven't read it in the New York Times, but I have read it in kind of the gossip magazines around Washington, D.C., that the video inside the Capitol of January 3rd, 4th, and 5th that might show members of Congress giving people tours was deleted before Donald Trump left the White House. I asked Congressman Khan about this last week, and he said he didn't know. He wasn't sure. Do you have any information on that?
No, I'm in the same spot. I haven't heard that, so I don't know.
Okay. All righty. Let's pick up another phone call here. Let's see. Whoop. There we go. John in Redmond, Washington. John, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Minute and a half to the break.
Yeah, real quick. I'm curious on the first point about the ceasefire. If we have a Democratic president in power with presumably a Democratic UN representative, how is it possible and why are we blocking the Security Council vote on the ceasefire?
Well, it's the same thing that we've been asking for a ceasefire, and Joe Biden is recommending it. But honestly, we need to demand it. We give a lot of assistance to Israel. They are an ally. But again, as I've said in many interviews, if your friend every night after work is getting drunk and then getting behind the wheel and risking people's lives, you say something to your friend, we should be able to have a relationship like that with Israel where we can demand a ceasefire. I mean, they're killing at a 20-fold the number of lives that have been killed by the rockets out of Gaza. The only winners right now out of all this are Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas, not the people of Israel or Palestine. And I think we need
why
to have
is our UN ambassador blocking that?
Well, because Joe Biden is still doing the we're allies of Israel, but we are pushing him at this level to say, and there's going to be a letter today that we have supposedly 1 o'clock is the end sign-on, that 10 of us, a very diverse group of 10 of us, are asking for a ceasefire, and I'll bet you we may get to 100 members that sign it. Last I heard, we were at like 57, so it's going to be a big push.
Yeah, that's great. Congressman Mark Pocan with us, taking your calls. Pocan.house.gov is his website. You can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan, spelled just like it sounds, MarkPocan. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just 1 minute after I read an advertisement over on the commercial side of the show. Stick around.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. We have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com about conspiracy theories. Abby Richards came up with a kind of a hierarchy of conspiracies, maybe a variation on the old Maslow hierarchy. And it goes from actual conspiracies to maybe this was a conspiracy, maybe not, we have questions, to this is kind of crazy stuff, but who knows, flying saucers, for example, to actual science denial, conspiracy theories that actually serve to promote the interests of a particular industry or wealthy individuals, to the totally crazy stuff, the flat earth, the reptilian overlords and all that kind of thing, conspiracy theories that can do tremendous damage. And, one of those being one of the conspiracy theories that, brought two Republicans into Congress this year. So anyhow, I lay the whole thing out with a new video for our supporters over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. Rhonda in Charleston, West Virginia. You are on the air with Representative Pocan.
Hi, yes, Mr. Pocan. I have an interesting question. We have a retirement home in the southeastern part of North Carolina, and we're visiting there now. We've been approached by a couple of neighbors asking us if we can get ammunition, but there's some sort of ammunition shortage. Here in the United States, I had no idea. We were gun owners, but we're responsible gun owners. And I looked it up on the internet. All the major manufacturers are still making the same amount. And I pressed them as to why we're not getting, they don't have ammunition. And they pretty much said it was due to the protests of Black Lives Matter. Is the government aware of a particular group stockpiling ammunition at this point? And what do you see as the future as to what's going on?
No, and I'm not sure if simple that Google might have given you the answer. I can tell you this. I have a specialty printing business back in Wisconsin, and we got noticed recently some of the little metal steel stakes that go into signs. We were told by one supplier that they can't fulfill any more orders because there's a steel shortage. It could be more of a situation like that because we know that is true. There is a steel shortage, but I don't know anything that there's a stockpiling of ammunitions or anything. So it's something I think I'd have to put a little more effort into looking into, but I have not heard that up to this point.
Douglas in Dewey, Arizona. You're on the air with Representative Pocan.
Yeah, my question is, a lot of Americans seem to like Joe Biden, so why isn't he putting his face on SB1 ads? And my other question was, how come Democrats can't do good ads like the Lincoln Project can, and our ads are like so-so? I'll listen to you off there. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, first of all, don't forget a lot of different groups do ads. So, Lincoln Project got a lot of attention, quite honestly, from the media on their stuff. And I can't give you a broad stroke on different ads, but I know what you're saying. You'd like to see the most effective messaging, and sometimes we don't always see it. I don't know if it matters if Joe Biden's picture is on it. He's a strong supporter of it. There's no question. In fact, we think the one best unifying issue for us to get around the filibuster in the Senate is around voting rights and many of the components of H.R. 1, because there's wide support in the Senate to get this done. Playing whack-a-mole with states who try to violate people's ability to vote is not something that there's a lot of controversy over. So it's not that Joe Biden doesn't want to. It's probably that they're sending specific messages in specific districts with specific messengers in order to affect the change that they need to make sure they can get the votes they need. So I don't think there's any greater reason.
Paul in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Congressman. Thanks for taking my call. I'm just curious, since the Republicans are so bent on including an investigation of Antifa and Black Lives Matter as part of the January 6th investigation, why don't the Democrats just call their bluff and say, okay, we'll have a separate January 6th investigation, and we'll have a separate investigation into Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and white supremacy, and include the infiltration of white supremacist groups in Black Lives Matter and Antifa protests.
And police?
Yeah, the only thing, Paul, is you're giving credence to the existence of the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot, right? I mean, their argument has as much credibility, and by just even raising it to that level, you're saying, all right, we're going to find the Loch Ness Monster. Let's go swimming. And I just don't think that serves a purpose. Everyone knows what happened on January 6th from visually seeing it that day, but we do have to get down to the roots of what happened, and I think we can do that. But I don't know if just, adding white supremacy to that, because I think you're going to have white supremacy come out of the current investigation, which again is part of why I think Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell don't want the commission, because the more truth that comes out, the more it shows how close that relationship is to the modern Republican Party.
Joan, also in Philadelphia, you're on the air with Representative Pocan. We have 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Yes, Congressman, I wondered if you or any of your other colleagues have seen a parallel over the last few years in the United States to the rise of the Nazis in the 1930s, especially with such polished misinformation going out and having millions of people who feel that they're victims of something accepted. Thank you.
Yeah, I've seen more and more of this, Joan. I mean, there's no question. People have written that this is much of looks like a lot what the rise of the Nazis did, and just the big lies. I mean, I just had a journalist yesterday, Tom, and it shouldn't bother me, but it does, who's claiming I haven't been in Washington for 8 months because I had a proxy letter that one day when I didn't show up because I think we had a difficulty getting here on a plane, and they claim I haven't been here for 8 months, which is easy to verify. Looking at Twitter, Facebook. I mean, I'm in D.C. right now in my office. This isn't my bedroom at home, and yet here I am trying to defend it. The person won't admit they're wrong. It's just the big lie is so prevalent at every level right now that absolutely, Joan, you're right. I mean, there's just too many parallels, and it's a bit eerie.
Yeah, and they're not stopping. I mean, they just absolutely are not stopping, which is why we need these investigations or a special prosecutor, in my humble opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour. Member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, representing the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's a member and former co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We'll be right back with Representative Pocan in just a moment. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Rep Mark Pocan on Twitter, pocan.house.gov on the internet. We'll be right back.
Our book today is Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism and Other Arguments for Economic Independence by Kristen Godsey. And this is from the introduction titled, You Might Be Suffering from Capitalism. The argument of this book can be summed up succinctly. Unregulated capitalism is bad for women. And if we adopt some ideas from socialism, women will have better lives. If done properly, socialism leads to economic independence, better labor conditions, better work-family balance, and yes, even better sex. Finding a way into a better future requires learning from the mistakes of the past, including a thoughtful assessment of the history of 20th century state socialism in Eastern Europe. That's it. If you like the idea of such outcomes, then come along for an exploration of how we might change things. If you're dubious because you don't understand why capitalism as an economic system is uniquely bad for women, and if you doubt that there could ever be anything good about socialism, this short treatise will provide some illumination. If you don't give a whit about women's lives because you're a gynophobic right-wing internet troll, save your money and go back to your parents' basement right now. This isn't the book for you. Of course, some might argue that unregulated capitalism sucks for almost everyone, but I want to focus on how capitalism disproportionately harms women. Competitive labor markets discriminate against those whose reproductive biology makes them primarily responsible for childbearing. Today, this means humans who get pink hats in the hospital and the letter F next to the name on their birth certificate, as if we've already failed by not coming into the world as a boy. Competitive labor markets also devalue those expected to be the primary caregivers of children. Although societal attitudes have evolved in this regard, our idealization of motherhood means that most of us still believe that baby needs mama, a whole lot more than papa, at least until the child is old enough to play sports. Others will argue that unregulated capitalism is not bad for all women. Yes, for those women lucky enough to sit at the top of the income distribution, the system works pretty well. Although women at the executive level still face gender pay gaps and remain underrepresented in leadership positions, on the whole, things aren't too shabby for the Sheryl Sandbergs of the world. Of course, sexual harassment still hinders progress, even for those at the top, and too many women believe that if you want to run with the big dogs, you may have to suck it up and ignore the groping and unwanted advances. And race plays an important role as well. White women do a lot better in aggregate than do women of color. But when we look at society as a whole, on average, women are comparatively worse off in countries where markets are less encumbered by regulation, taxation, and public enterprises than they are in nations where state revenues support greater levels of redistribution and larger social safety nets. Choose your data source, and you find the same story. Unemployment and poverty plague women with children. Employers discriminate against women without children because they might have them in the future. In the United States in 2013, women over the age of 65 suffered from poverty at much greater rates than men and dominated those in the category of extreme poverty. Globally, women face higher rates of economic deprivation. Women are often the last to be hired and the first to be fired in cyclical downturns. And when they do find employment, bosses pay them less than men. When states need to slash government spending on education, health care, or old age pensions, mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives must pick up the slack, diverting their energy to care for the young, the sick, and the elderly. Capitalism thrives on women's unpaid labor in the home because women's care work supports lower taxes. Lower taxes mean higher profits for those already at the top of the income ladder, mostly men. But capitalism was not always so savage. Throughout much of the 20th century, state socialism presented an existential challenge to the worst excesses of the free market. The threat posed by Marxist ideologies forced Western governments to expand social safety nets to protect workers from the unpredictable but inevitable booms and busts of the capitalist economy. After the Berlin Wall fell, many celebrated the triumph of the West, consigning socialist ideas to the dustbin of history. But for all its faults, state socialism provided an important foil for capitalism. It was in response to a global discourse of social and economic rights, a discourse that appealed not only to the progressive populations of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, but also to many men and women in Europe and Western Europe and North America, that politicians agreed to improve working conditions for wage laborers, as well as to create social programs for children, the poor, the elderly, the sick, and the disabled, mitigating exploitation and the growth of income inequality. Although there were important antecedents in the 1980s, once state socialism collapsed, capitalism shook off the constraints of market regulation and income redistribution. Without the looming threat of a rival superpower, the last 30 years of global neoliberalism have witnessed a rapid shriveling of social programs that protect citizens from cyclical instability and financial crises, and reduce the vast inequality of economic outcomes between those at the top and those at the bottom of the income distribution. For much of the 20th century, Western capitalist countries also endeavored to outdo the East European countries in terms of women's rights, fueling progressive social change. For example, the state socialists in the USSR and Eastern Europe were so successful at giving women economic opportunities outside the home that initially, for the 2 decades after the end of World War II, women's wage work was conflated with the evils of communism. The American way of life meant male breadwinners and female homemakers. But slowly, socialist championing of women's emancipation began to chip away at the Leave It to Beaver ideal. The Soviet launch of Sputnik in 1957 spurred American leaders to rethink the costs of maintaining traditional gender roles. They feared the state socialists enjoyed an advantage in technological development, and why women have better sex under socialism.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Astonishing news out of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that has to do with the lifespan of Americans. Since World War II, the average lifespan of American men and women have continuously increased, all the way up to 78.8 years in 2019. Continuous increase. Things were getting better, more and more people were getting health care, we were making medical technology advances, there was a rather dramatic decline in smoking between the 1990s and the 2010s. All kinds of things were working together. And then came Donald Trump's response to COVID-19. causing America, with 4% of the world's population, to have 20% of the world's deaths. The result of that has been extraordinary. For the first time since World War II, American life expectancy has declined. It's all over in a new video for supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour in our national progressive town hall meeting with Congressman Pocan. And what I was looking for before, and my apologies for not grabbing it, he is also on the Appropriations Committee, the Education and Labor Committee. Do I have all that right, Congressman?
You do, and Joint Economic Council Committee as well.
Okay, cool. We'll add that in. Thank you. Alan in click the button here. Alan in Crown Point, Indiana. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, Congressman, a ceasefire seems warranted in this at the present time, but how do you continue to negotiate with terrorists that are backed by Iran? How do you do it?
Well, part of the problem is very complex in Palestine, right? Because you've got the PA, which is the Palestinian Authority, which largely has the political oversight in the West Bank, Hamas, which loosely has the political oversight in Gaza, but because of the conditions in Gaza, no one can come or go. And it's 2 million people in essentially an open-air prison, and people are being radicalized, especially these things don't help. Hamas police even have been attacked by more jihadist entities because of these conditions. So part of it is getting at those fundamental conditions. The last time I was in the region, I was told point blank on multiple occasions that if we really solved the peace situation with Israel and Palestine, that you'd take away the number one argument that extreme elements use to recruit people to be terrorists. And yet, instead, we haven't really done that. We allow people to still be their dignity and their human rights not to be respected. So I just think it's time for a different approach. It hasn't worked now for years and decades. Maybe we have to try something a little different. And I'm hoping that with this new surge of members of Congress and others asking for this, that we've got some hope.
Russ in Hickory Hill, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call, Tom. And
my apologies for hanging up on you earlier, Russ. My mistake entirely.
Hey, I did this. I took 30 years on a beer truck. I was hung up a lot. But I wanted to ask, this unemployment we've been handing out to these states, 19 states now all of a sudden cut it off. When are you people going to ask for the money back from them or make them give it out? Because you know what they're going to do with it. They're just going to plug their holes for the tax cuts. And I'm surprised West Virginia and Montana senators ain't crying. Their states were one of the first to do it. You guys got any power in making them hand this money out? Or are we going to get shafted again?
Russ, first of all, I don't think it's correct that they have the money in advance because you wouldn't know what people's unemployment is, so they won't get the money. The problem is Republicans are fine with that. They don't care if they don't have resources to help their constituents because it's a political talking point they're after. So it's not that money will still go to them and they'll put it towards something else. But I think what's really important, Russ, and thanks for giving me this opportunity, because I've been asked this by a number of reporters back home, is it's not because of those UI benefits that people you've got employers having a hard time finding people. Some of it, I've been told by economists, because of my role on the Joint Economic Committee, is due to people who have been afraid to go back into the workforce because of COVID. Some have been people who don't have child care as an option because we know there's not as many child care providers right now, and that's holding people back going into the workforce. Some of it, and the biggest part of it, is around the real minimum wage is not increased for 12 years, $7.35 an hour, but the effective minimum wage is what's going on right now. And if businesses aren't willing to pay at that rate because they're trying to live with this artificially low 12-year-old federal minimum wage, well, then they're going to have a hard time finding people to work, and that's just part of the reality. So, I think that, one, that money won't be wasted, Russ, so I think we're in pretty good shape on that. But secondly, we need to start getting that message out there that a lot of this is about employers who aren't coming to the reality of what the effective minimum wage is in their communities, and it has very little to do with UI.
David in Long Beach, California, you're on the air with Representative Pocan.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Representative Pocan. I was just calling to find out if anything is being done or can be done in Congress to help with these spam or scam phone calls. I can't even answer my phone anymore. you're just getting someone trying to sell you a car warranty or something like that. I'm just wondering, is there something that can be done?
Yeah, I know state by state we've seen a lot of this. They have do not call lists, and the problem is because of some of the bigger companies that are out there, they've made it you have to constantly sign up again and again and again rather than making it easier for the consumer. But there are a number of these in a number of states, and if your state doesn't have one, you should try to get it there. But I believe that's because the regulation is more direct at that level. But I don't have a better answer for you, David, because it's not something I've dealt with through my main committee of appropriations. And I would think, given how much we hear this issue, if there was a direct federal response that could happen, we would be proposing it. So I think it's probably going to happen at your state level.
Paul in Ellsbury, Missouri, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, thank you. I was wanting to know if you somehow would be able to talk to the president into changing his mind about the Space Force that Trump organized, and President Biden had said he was going to go ahead with it. Because the Space Force, or like Ronald Reagan when he wanted the Star Wars, and I just don't see us putting military into space.
Yeah, so they've reorganized parts of the other defense agencies and made the Space Force. And while I agree, I think it's silly to have this separate entity, it appears that they've decided that's not a target they're going after. What I can tell you is we've had a lot of conversations. Barbara Lee and I have formed a Pentagon spending reduction caucus, and we're really trying to get at, accountability, auditing, and stopping putting as much money into just, weapons of war. And I think the real strategy we're talking about right now, Paul, that I think can be especially helpful is defense of our country does not have to just be military weapons, right? Defense of our country is dealing with climate change. Defense of our nation is dealing with healthcare. And I think our focus is going to be really to shift more of how we define defense, and that means how we spend our money into things that really are in defense of this country. Let's face it, the last year, the number one defense of this country has been around COVID, and those dollars aren't in the Defense Department, and they probably should be.
Peter in Oak Park, Illinois, you're on the air with Representative Pocan.
Thank you, Tom. Congressman, I'm just so curious about something. With all the divisiveness, and you guys the Democrats are stymied on a daily basis from Republicans openly saying that they're not going to go along with anything that you put forth. What exactly is a day like for you? Maybe this is too broad of a question, but I'm just wondering if you can paint a picture for us. Do you guys meet in the halls and roll your eyes and laugh about Marjorie Taylor Greene, or do you are you just wringing your hands over some of this nonsense? It must be very frustrating. I'm just curious if you can tell us what your day's like.
Sure, Peter. I'll tell you, my perspective on this is that the Republican Party is going through a severe identity crisis. It doesn't know if it's a socially conservative party, a fiscally conservative party, a Tea Party, a Q Party, a disco party. What they probably are still is a cult, right? They're still doing whatever Donald Trump tells them. He's still pulling the strings. And yet any given day, 2 or 3 of those elements of the Republican Party comes out. So it's hard because you don't know who you're negotiating with and what they actually believe, because they don't know who they are and what they believe. So that's the real difficulty I have, because, I've done this for a long time in my life, and I can work with people who I disagree with, and you can do it at times, you can do it without being disagreeable. But if you don't know who you're talking to and where they're negotiating from, that makes it a lot tougher. I think the other element that I think is only fair to bring up is we have a 50-50 Senate, and right now a 5-digit margin, 5-person margin in the House. And sometimes even my own colleagues in my own party can be problems if the special interests get to them. So it's a tough time to move things forward, which is why I've been so far pretty impressed with what Joe Biden has been willing to do in a pretty big, bold way, especially around the American Rescue Plan. Now, progressives, and a lot of us got together for a dinner this week between the House and the Senate, and we're trying to lay out some more strategies on how to continue to push good issues forward, because there's ways we can do it, especially with reconciliation. But we're not going to let the Republicans, if they don't want to come to the table, it doesn't mean we're not serving the meal, right? We're not going to let people go hungry. We'll try to get things done. But sometimes we're going to have difficulty even in our own party.
Congressman, 25 seconds to the hard break. What are some of those strategies, if you don't mind my asking?
Sure. On some of the must-pass bills, because there are bills that absolutely have to go through Congress. So what can we attach to them? How can we use things like reconciliation that take a simple 50 votes if there won't be serious filibuster reform? And how can we have serious filibuster reform around something as important as voting rights? So there's a number of strategies that we're looking at.
Good. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us, taking your calls for the hour. Middays with Mark, our National Progressive Town Hall meeting. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. It's 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann program. Talk media for the sane among us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. And welcome back. Marta in Big Bear Lake, California. You are on the air with Representative Pocan.
Hello, Representative Pocan. You are my hero for your speech on human rights, what's going on. And it would be wonderful, and I hope you can maybe answer, can't we have on mainstream media a more in-depth discussion about the settlements in specifically international Geneva conventions? I mean, these people are 70% refugees and their children. And, it's not really settlements, it's actually expulsion. So I would love to hear your point of view about, whether we can actually have a more, in-depth contextualized discussion about expulsion.
Yeah, Marta, I think one of the things that hasn't gotten out there again, and sometimes the mainstream media doesn't cover issues of international relations especially well. They make it sound like it all started when rockets came out of Gaza, and they forget the months and years and decades prior and everything that happened. But, yes, several hundred people, including many, many children, were killed in Palestine, and a dozen or so people were killed in Israel, including at least some children or at least a child. But what doesn't get reported as much, 58,000 people within Gaza have been displaced because of the continual pummeling of buildings that supposedly are Hamas targets. But don't forget, we're targets of AP and Al Jazeera and BBC, or the road to a hospital, one of the few hospitals in the area, were also targets. And, we need to talk about that because, human rights is human rights, whether it's Yemen, whether it's right now Colombia, what's happening with the police in social unrest, or what's happening in the Middle East. And certainly when you have the separatism that you have between the Palestinians and the Israelis that's done at the call of the Israelis, we have to look at that and wonder at what point does it look too much like a former South Africa and really taking away the life and liberties of Palestinians to a point that we have to speak out more. And I think that's why more citizens absolutely in the United States are doing that, and we're finally getting some elected officials to do the same.
Ken in Santa Ana, listening on KPFK. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Minute and a half to the break. No, Ken. Okay, let's try Edward in Long Beach, California, listening on KPFK. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. 1 minute to the break.
Okay, hello, Representative Pocan. I think you are doing an excellent job representing our country for peace and freedom for the Palestinian people. I just wonder how we can believe that Israel is an ally of the United States. We are their ally. We help them. We give them billions of our tax money. But when our citizens are killed by the Israeli Defense Forces or Army, Rachel Corrie in 2003, she was waving a white flag in front of a Palestinian home. Her body was bulldozed front and back. She was a 24-year-old from Washington. Our USS Liberty back in 1967 during the Six-Day War was torpedoed and bombed by the Israelis.
Edward, we're running out of time here. What's your question?
Few people know about that. Well, I'm wondering, does Israel care about our interests?
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I mean, Edward, traditionally they have been an ally in places like the UN and other places. I'm not going to take away that label from them. However, just like you have friends that may do things that aren't in their best interest or their family's best interest, we need to call those things out. It's not that your friends, whatever they do is right. And I think that's the position that we need to change that's happening.
Coming up on 10 minutes before the hour, it's the Thom Hartmann program. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour.
And I will be right back in 1 minute after I read a signal wire ad on the other side of this. Stick around. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So David Perry over at Medium.com put together a list of 38 reasons to investigate the Trump administration. Everything from the Russian influence over the 2016 election, to the Trump family's collusion with Russia, to Ivanka Trump's trademarks, to federal spending at Trump properties, to the civilians killed by Trump's drone strikes, to the Trump administration's role in turning the United States into the global epicenter for the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, we are. Yes, it's grim. Their decision to sideline the CDC, politicizing mask wearing just to try to get himself reelected, the number of people who died because the White House kept PPE from blue states, from Democratic-led states, the contents of the Trump documents that Trump refused to release to the House Judiciary Committee and other committees, all the people who wouldn't speak, at all, ignoring subpoenas, violations of the Hatch Act, the deportation of COVID-positive immigrant families, illegal altering of records. Anyhow, there's a whole list. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Taking your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan and Greg in Lompoc, California. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan. Greg? No Greg. Okay, let's try Steve in Topanga, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Oh, that's weird. Are you sure that we have audio going to the phones? Okay, I'm going to put Steve on hold rather than drop him, and let's try Cheryl in Studio City. Hey, Cheryl, can you hear me? Congressman Pocan, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, then I don't know why Cheryl can't hear me. That's totally strange. I'm going to put Cheryl on hold. Something must have just happened. Ken in Santa Ana, can you hear me? Okay, Congressman, Sean, you're sure that you've got hybrid 1 up and in the right, everything's where it should be. Okay, I'm going to put these folks on hold while Sean just kind of goes over our board and double and triple checks everything. Congressman, we do have 7 or 8 minutes left until the top of the hour. What are the things that you think, in terms of activism, that those of us who care about what's going on should really be doing right now?
I think the big issues that we're going to be facing right now is the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan, which is also known as the infrastructure plans, and keeping those together, because some of it is human infrastructure, some of it is more physical infrastructure that people are more used to. And I think, combining that and making sure we get this done is going to be really important, because there's a lot of really great, progressive, positive things we did in the rescue plan that can be continued into the future in these bills. And we need to be fighting for that by talking to our elected officials and not letting the special interests in Washington stop them from moving forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to try, we're going to try hybrid 1 for Steve in Topanga, California right now and see if it works. Steve, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've solved whatever was going on here. Steve, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah. I don't understand, and I think it's poor strategy, that the notion of ceasefire always seems to be pointing at Israel. It's like expecting Israel to lay down their arms while they're being attacked by hundreds of thousands of rockets. And I think it's better strategy to focus the ceasefire on mutual ceasefire. And I think it might disempower a lot of the negative attitudes that are being generated. What do you think?
Yeah, so first of all, Steve, that's exactly what we're doing. We're saying mutual ceasefire. The difference is Israel has hundreds times the lethal power in their hands, and they're using it right now. So that's why you have 58,000 people, who are now homeless in Gaza. That's why you have hundreds of people, including scores of children, who've been killed because of the military might they have. Don't forget, the rockets coming out of Gaza are largely random rockets. I'm not saying anything good about Hamas. They should be condemned absolutely for this. But we also have to condemn the human rights violations that take away the life and liberty and dignity of the Palestinian people if we're ever going to have peace in this region. And in this case, continue to take out buildings and roads to hospitals and doing what we're doing is not going to get us to peace any quicker. We need a ceasefire by everyone. But obviously, we have the most influence with Israel. And yesterday, they turned it down again. And that's the problem. They can't continue to turn us down. Many of us are getting a little bit tired of waiting.
Ken in Santa Ana, California, you are on the air with Representative Pocan.
Yes. I think you better forget about the bilateral commission and go to the special prosecutor, because the special prosecutors come up with stuff like they did against Nixon and they did against the Iran-Contra with Walsh. And the commissions have never come up with anything. They just rubber stamped a preconceived idea. The 9/11 Commission and the Kennedy Commission, neither one of them came up with any definitive answers.
Congressman?
Yeah, Ken, I hear what you're saying. I think sometimes there's a sequence of how we do things. And, we're trying our best to make this a bipartisan effort, because they should care about what happened on January 6th as much as we do. Everyone should. It shouldn't be partisan at all. And if it winds up getting blocked, we have to look at every other path forward. But ideally, this is something you would do. We've made it so it's an evenly split commission. And if they can't even do that, then they expose themselves as the hypocrites. And I think we can move forward in other ways. But I totally understand what you're saying.
Congressman, 30 seconds to the end of the hour. Thoughts on where we should be directing our attention in the coming weeks?
The next couple of months are crucial for the infrastructure package and for our next appropriations package. And so I think just people being ready to be engaged, reaching out to your elected officials, and then also don't forget issues of peace and justice like we're watching right now in the Middle East. Speak out. We need that more than ever right now.
Yeah. And join your local Democratic Party?
Absolutely. And other groups like, Move On and DFA, and go down the list. There's a lot of great groups. If someone is backing things you care about, work with them and be active and vocal.
Amen. Congressman, so great having you with us. Thanks so much for dropping by today.
Of course, Tom. Thank you.
Congressman Mark Pocan. Pocan.house.gov is his website. You can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan. We'll be back with my thoughts on what's going on with the election of 2024 already with this commission.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartmann. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Today's book in our book club is The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, by this guy, Thom Hartmann. This is from chapter 1, or from the introduction, actually. In 2016, 6% of Americans who were eligible to vote nominated Donald Trump as the GOP's presidential candidate. It was 8% for Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side. Trump went on to be elected president by 26% of eligible voters. The modern American oligarchs have largely stayed in power using 3 simple elements: explicit and overt racism, massive disinformation campaigns, and voter suppression. No ideas, no push for better schools, hospitals, airports, roads, or bridges, or reform of our health, energy, or financial systems. No promise of more and better jobs. None of these staples of past presidential campaigns can be found in pretty much any Republican advertising today. Instead, the public Republican message is all about race, or the subset of race, religion. Muslim stands in for brown Arab in GOP speak, and immigration, aka brown people from south of our border, and socialism. Meanwhile, Republican secretaries of state across the nation are vigorously purging voters from the rolls. Over 17 million, more than 10% of America's active voters, in just the 2016-2018 period, according to NBC News. After the 5 Republican appointees on the U.S. Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, 14 GOP-controlled states moved within a year, some within days, to restrict access to the vote, particularly for communities of color, students, and retired people. In North Carolina, for example, 158 polling places were permanently closed in the 40 counties with the most African-American voters just before the 2016 election, leading to a 16% decline in African-American early voting in that state. An MIT study found that nationwide, Hispanic voters wait 150% longer in line than white voters, and black voters can expect to wait 200% longer in line to vote. In Indiana, then Governor Mike Pence's new rigorous voter ID law caused an 11.5% drop in African-American voting. Students are suing for their right to vote, and retired people who no longer drive but care passionately about their Social Security and Medicare are being turned away at the polls by the hundreds of thousands because their driver's licenses have expired. The obvious failure of 40-plus years of Reaganomics and GOP policies to maintain a functional middle class in America has been a problem for the modern GOP. In 1974, for example, the GOP had outright control of only 7 states. The message, elect us and we'll help the rich people, just didn't generally resonate with American voters. It's the reason why, outside of the fluke elections of 46 and 52, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives outright for 3 generations, from 1933 to 1996, and controlled the Senate for most of that time. Desperate to win the presidency for the GOP in 1968, Richard Nixon went so far as to commit treason by torpedoing a peace deal with President Lyndon Johnson that President Lyndon Johnson had worked out with the North and South Vietnamese. According to Abul Hassan Bani Sadr, then president of Iran, Ronald Reagan did the same thing by cutting a deal with Iran whereby they would hold on to the U.S. embassy hostages until after the 1980 presidential election, torpedoing Jimmy Carter's chances of re-election. But in 2000, the GOP changed tactics. After Reagan was almost busted for his part in Iran-Contra, he testified that he had forgotten about details of the program more than 80 times. His growing Alzheimer's spared him an indictment. They realized that getting busted for treason wasn't worth the risk. They needed a plan B, and it was deliciously simple. If most voters don't like what you're selling, then just don't let them vote. Paul Weyrich promoted this idea back in 1980 when he was campaigning for Reagan after co-founding the Heritage Foundation. And indeed, many Republican luminaries, such as William Rehnquist, who went from serving the GOP by standing in polling places and intimidating Hispanic and Native American voters in the 1960s, to becoming Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, rose up through the ranks by participating in Republican-run voter intimidation schemes. Voter suppression became the foundational go-to tactic for the GOP in 2000. Although the GOP attacked Democratic presidential nominee Al Gore with smear and innuendo, ridiculing him for helping write the legislation that created the modern internet, for example, the main thing that got George W. Bush into the White House was voter suppression. His brother, Florida Governor Jeb Bush, and Bush's Secretary of State, Katherine Harris, threw somewhere between 20,000 and 90,000 African-American voters off the rolls. They were able to get the vote close enough. The 5 Republican appointees to the Supreme Court functionally awarded Bush the presidency. The BBC covered this in 2001 in 2 major investigative reports that were seen all over the world, except on any American media. By 2016, the Republican Party had fine-tuned its voter suppression and intimidation systems to the point that they ran like well-oiled machines in nearly 30 states. Between the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections, for example, Ohio had purged more than 2 million voters from its rolls, the vast majority, more than 2 to 1, in heavily African-American and Hispanic counties. The 5 Republican appointees on the Supreme Court ruled in 2017 that they could keep it up. And other states have since adopted their new tactic of caging voters. The book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, by me.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. Thom Hartmann here with you. The election war of 2024 is being fought right now. That's the title of the piece that I published on Hartmann Report this morning. And basically, you know, with the rant that I planned for this show, they're typically the same thing. And what we're looking at right now, in my opinion, is a battle for the survival of the American Republic. And if the American Republic falls and becomes a fascist petro-state, and in fact, if it becomes an ethno-nationalist fascist petro-state, which is the direction that the petro-billionaires are trying to push us, and the white supremacists in the Republican Party are trying to push us, if we fall, being the richest country in the world, the most powerful military power in the world, the original democracy in the modern age. If we fall, the rest of it falls, right? I mean, how long would Europe be able to stand up against, for example, you know, China and Russia and an alliance of other countries? You know, you've now got Hungary and Poland and Turkey. That have become basically neo-fascist states. And Turkey's part of the European Union. Hungary is part of the European Union. I believe Poland is part of the EU. I'm not sure if they're part of the shared currency or not, but it's happening, right? And part of it here in the United States is that Republicans and their authoritarian supporters are working right now to steal the 2024 election. They're doing this on a state-by-state basis. And they're trying to drop their treason attempt in 2020, which, mark my words, they will repeat in 2 years, well, in 2022, a year and a half, and in 4 years. They will repeat this. You know, there's the old joke. What do you call a failed coup? A rehearsal. We can't let them get away with it. At the same time that this is happening, the Republicans are literally trying to rig elections and trying to cause Americans not to believe in our own system of government, but rather to embrace a neo-fascist authoritarian oligarchy. I wrote a whole book warning about this, The Hidden History of American Oligarchy. It is happening right in front of us as we speak right now. And as that is happening, Democrats are sitting around going, well, we're trying to engage in a good faith negotiation with the Republicans to have a January 6th commission, a 1/6 commission. No, I'm sorry. This is a war. The Republicans have figured out it's a war. Democrats, Democrats need to forget about bipartisanship. We have the House, we have the Senate, we have the White House, and odds are if we don't use that power now, we will not have at least 2 of those branches in January of 2023, which means that by November 2024, January 2025, Democrats will hold no power at the federal level, which means the end of democracy in the United States and the world. It's that real. It's that serious. This bipartisan commission stuff is just, it's just nonsense. You've got some good Republicans trying to do something. I mean, Amanda Carpenter's writing over at the Bulwark. You know, she used to be the communications director for Jim DeMint and the speechwriter for Ted Cruz. She says, no one should be surprised that elected Republicans are not, as a class, eager to support the commission. For some, such as House Minority Leader McCarthy and the people who spoke at the January 6th rally, a vote for the commission is a vote to investigate themselves. If anything, their opposition is further evidence of the need for an independent investigation. I agree. We need an independent investigation. A bipartisan commission is not the way to do it. And Republicans have, and just an hour or so ago, Chuck Schumer came out, Mitch McConnell came out and said, we are going to block this thing in the United States Senate. Why? Well, for the obvious reason that Amanda Carpenter pointed out. The Republicans don't want to investigate themselves. You've got 140 plus, I think it's 147 members of Congress who, after the January 6th insurrection, still voted to say, no, Joe Biden's not really the president. What are you going to do with these people? Do you expect these folks to say, oh, yeah, let's hold an investigation into ourselves? People who are giving tours to traitors in the days before the attempted coup? No. Here's how this needs to play out. Forget the commission stuff. The way this needs to play out is that Chuck Schumer needs to get control of his caucus. He needs to go to Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin and say, you guys are going to vote with all the rest of the Democrats, and maybe there's a few others who are opposed to ending the filibuster. He needs to go to those folks and say, we are going to do this now. The summer vacation is coming. It's coming in a couple of weeks, and it's going to last all the way till September. And then when Congress comes back in September, the election season for 2022 has already started, and you're not going to get squat done. He needs to sit these folks down and say, you are going to join us in ending the filibuster now, or replacing it with a Jimmy Stewart filibuster, where if a Republican wants to block a piece of legislation, they've got to have 40 members on the floor continuously, and somebody has to be talking. And when they fail in that for even 1 minute, we hold a vote. And then all of America can see the Republican hypocrisy and lies and stupidity. But number one, he needs to get rid of the filibuster, whether he has to threaten his recalcitrant members or whether he has to offer them the moon. We will move NASA to your state. I don't care how he does it. But if Chuck Schumer can't pull this off, he needs to be replaced. President Biden needs to get in there and say, we are going to replace Schumer with somebody who actually understands the Lyndon Johnson school of majority Senate management. And then once that filibuster is gone and Democrats can actually pass laws, the first law they need to pass is an independent prosecutor or special prosecutor or independent counsel or whatever you call it these days. We've been through several of them, and we've been through different legislation to make them happen. We need a Leon Jaworski. We need an Archibald Cox, if you're old enough to remember these guys. We need these folks who actually know how to seriously go after the people who have committed these crimes. No more namby-pamby commission stuff. No more bipartisanship. We need a Ken Starr, a Lawrence Walsh. We need a Robert Mueller who hasn't been told by Bill Barr, you can't look at anything prior to the election. So you can't look into, for example, Donald Trump's involvement with foreign organized crime or foreign oligarchs or foreign governments. That actually was a restraint put on Mueller by Bill Barr. You know, the 9/11 Commission failed to even look into Bush and Cheney's lies around 9/11, or their incompetence, the fact that Bill Clinton and Al Gore warned them 9/11 was coming, and they ignored it. 9/11 Commission never looked into it. Why? Because it was half Republicans. You think Republicans are going to investigate Republicans in any kind of serious and honest way? There's a reason why they never investigated Cheney and how he had run Halliburton into the ground. It was on the verge of bankruptcy when he left as CEO and became vice president. And suddenly they're getting billions in no-bid contracts, and they're putting together such shoddy work that it's killing American soldiers. No, the commission never investigated that either.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
They never even bothered looking at Cheney's stock holdings in Halliburton. We don't need a commission. We need a prosecutor. And welcome back. Excuse me. Let's see here. Hunter in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Hunter, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's up?
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I was just wondering to get your thoughts on the likelihood of the GOP party eventually splitting in two between Trumpers and the GOP party that are anti-Trump.
It's happening right now in front of us. I mean, look at Liz Cheney versus Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah, and that's what sparked my interest in this. And do you think Liz Cheney would be spearheading this, or do you think it'll actually merge into a third party?
I think the one thing that could hugely influence all of this is if there are, and I'm fully expecting this to happen, by the way, is that there are serious criminal charges brought against Donald Trump that are not technical mumbo jumbo, 16 years ago he failed to file Form 290 on the, revealing his conflict of interest, and it's not that kind of stuff. Yeah. Some kind of crime that people, the average Joe could look at and go, holy crap, he did that? Right? That Trump gets brought up on charges, like Matt Gaetz, right? Everybody understands, a 36-year-old man and a 17-year-old girl, not good. It's got to be something, and not necessarily a sex crime, although it could be, but it's got to be something everybody understands. At that point, I'm guessing that a significant number of the pro-Trump Republicans will cease to be pro-Trump Republicans, and then the question becomes, do they follow somebody else? Does Marjorie Taylor Greene become the leader of the party? Or do they merge back into the old Republican Party scam that they've been running since Ronald Reagan and pretend that they're actually interested in the average person, and we're going to, go back to talking about tax cuts and deregulation? But the Republican Party is right now in the midst of an existential crisis, and that crisis is caused by one man, Donald Trump, and because the party's been a scam since the 80s, right? They've been running a con on the American people. Eisenhower rescued the Republican Party. Goldwater essentially took it back from the rational people, and it's been crazy train ever since. And I'm not hearing any Eisenhower Republican voices. What I'm hearing are Liz Cheney voices who want to take the GOP back to being the Reagan GOP, the Bush elder and Bush Jr. GOP, which is basically the Republican Party that is the shill for the big corporations and the billionaires, but at least isn't openly advocating sedition and treason. And, then maybe we can get back to some semblance of what has seemed normal over the last 40 years, bizarre as it is. But Hunter, I don't know. They're going to do everything they can to avoid splitting the party in two, because everybody knows that because we have first past the post, winner take all elections, where there are only 7 democracies in the world that are structured like ours. Because we have this, we always end up with a two-party system. It's built into it. And so if you spin off a third party, that third party is going to hurt the party that it came out of worse than anybody else. So if the Republican Party splits, they're really going to be powerless. I'd love to see it happen, frankly. I think it would be a great thing for the Democrats. But I think that they're going to do everything in their power to prevent that from happening. And frankly, for a lot of these Republicans, Donald Trump being indicted would be the best gift that they could get. So, we'll see how it shakes out. Hunter, thanks for the call. It's a great question. Stick around. We'll be right back. Coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So back in the day, and I mean back in the 1780s, literally, when the Constitutional Convention was happening in Philadelphia in the summer of 1787, there was this debate about the quality of the vote. Whether people who only landowners should be allowed to vote, stuff like that. And, in order to ensure that well-informed people who really care about voting are the only ones voting. It didn't pass. It was rejected by the framers of the Constitutional Convention, this idea that only landowners should be allowed to vote. Never made it in the Constitution. But a variation on this is now being proposed in the Arizona legislature. And State Representative John Kavanaugh, who's the chair of the committee that's pushing this legislation, says the quality of the vote is important. We have to look at the quality of votes as well. I've got a new video all about this for the supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Hey, it's time for a crazy alert. This is genuinely crazy stuff. I mean, genuinely crazy stuff. Over at Gateway Pundit, this is one of the websites that's, just constantly spewing Trump weirdness and whatnot. I don't know if you caught yesterday Joe Biden driving an electric Ford F-150. They are saying he wasn't actually driving it. The guy sitting next to him was driving it because he's 78 years old, and he can't drive a car anymore. I'm telling you, a couple of years ago, Louise and I bought the car that we've had for, I don't know, since we moved back here to Portland, 4 years now, I think. We bought a plug-in Prius hybrid. And so you plug it in at night, and it'll go 30 miles on a charge, and then it becomes just a normal hybrid. It burns gasoline, but it also has the hybrid battery and all that kind of stuff. Super good mileage. But I have literally, in the 4 years I've owned that car, bought 3 tanks of gas. Because, I only need gas if I'm going to go more than 30 miles. And basically anywhere in Portland is, 15, is within 30 miles. And I got to tell you, electric cars are amazing because you don't have the problem of internal combustion engines having to get up to speed and generate torque and all that kind of stuff. It's just power right up. You hit the gas pedal. I realize it's an electric pedal. You hit the pedal, and that thing shoots off like a rocket. Toys for boys on steroids. And of course, these guys on the right, they don't want there to be electric vehicles in the United States because so much of their money is coming from petro-billionaires, people who make money off fossil fuels. And so here we go. The headline, wow, Biden caught fake driving. Someone else is steering a vehicle. It was all a stunt. Right. So, this is the crazy stuff, and there's an agenda to it. By the way, the other story that I think is really important and I want to tell you about is vaccine passports are here and they're real. They just appeared. The vaccine passports here in Oregon. Oregon is the first state now to demand vaccine passports. It is absolutely incredible. Oregonians can now go maskless outside, but they must show proof of vaccination if you want to take off your mask indoors. This is the state. This is now a requirement of the state. Dr. Dean Seidlinger, this is from the Oregonian, our local newspaper. Dr. Dean Seidlinger, Oregon's health officer and epidemiologist, said he wasn't specifically aware of any other states that have adopted similar vaccine passport requirements as Oregon has opted to do. He used that phrase. He said vaccinated individuals will be required to show their vaccine cards or provide a photocopy or photo of their vaccine card to forego wearing a mask in a public indoor setting. You want to go into a store? I went to my dentist yesterday for the first time in a year and a half. I lost a filling in April, right, of last year, over a year ago. And I bought this temporary filling stuff online, and I've been every 3 months or so replacing this filling with this temporary stuff, using my finger as the, or my thumb as the way to get it into the side of the tooth. And it's worked pretty good, actually. My dentist said, hey, you're pretty good. But everybody in their office was masked. I walked in with a mask. And, and I was talking with the receptionist, and I said, are you requiring people to show proof of vaccination? And she said, I don't know if we can legally do that. And I said, you can absolutely legally do that in Oregon. See, this was before I read this piece in the Oregonian, that now it's required. This is starting next week, I believe. Neither one of us knew about this, and we were having this conversation. And I said, but I think you can. This is, you can put a sign in your window that says this is private property, and we enforce our own rules. No shirt, no service. No shoes, no service. No vaccine card, no service. And she was like, that's a great idea. We will have a conversation about this. Well, now Oregon is the first state to absolutely require this. So if you want to walk into your doctor's office or your dentist's office or whatever, if you can't show proof that you're vaccinated, you have to keep wearing a mask in Oregon. Now, I guarantee you the crazies are going to come out, and they're going to be protesting, and they're going to be freaking out, and you got a bunch of store owners in the state who are, and even some of the unions who are saying, wait a minute, you're turning us into the vaccine police, and we don't want to be the vaccine police. So, it's a tough one. And the Dean Seidlinger, the Oregon health officer, he said, we hope that Oregons will not lie or cheat and put others at risk by forging a vaccine record if they aren't vaccinated. Yeah, we hope. But it's going to be starting, let's see. This article doesn't say when this starts, so maybe it's effective immediately. I'm not sure. But they're saying, businesses and venue operators that don't want to check vaccine cards will still be allowed to require masks at their discretion. So this isn't like an absolute law, but it's damn close. Oregon, the first state with vaccine passports. What say you? Coming to your state? We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. It's the home of the political revolution, the Thom Hartmann Program.
For our book club today, we're reading Out of the Wreckage, A New Politics for an Age of Crisis by George Monbiot. This is from Chapter 3, Don't Look Back. The political history of the second half of the 20th century could be summarized as the conflict between its two great narratives, neoliberalism and social democracy. Social democracy in this era, whose story I briefly summarized in Chapter 1, acquired much of its power and coherence from the thinking of one remarkable man. Across 4 decades, John Maynard Keynes's work dominated economic thought and practice. During the period the French called the Trente Glorieuses, 1945 to 1975, his prescriptions are widely credited with reviving economies and distributing their benefits. That they remain more or less the only mainstream alternative to neoliberalism today reveals a remarkable stagnation of both thought and ambition. The first and most obvious problem with an attempt to use Keynesian social democracy as a core political narrative is that the story is more than 80 years old. Political stories need to be renewed. If politics does not feel fresh, it struggles to kindle the imaginative excitement from which hope arises. The second problem is that the surviving enthusiasm for Keynes among mainstream parties is highly selective. It has been reduced in most cases to lowering interest rates when economies are sluggish and engaging in tepid counter-cyclical public spending. which means injecting public money into the economy when unemployment is high or recession threatens. Other Keynesian measures, such as raising taxes when an economy grows quickly to dampen the boom-bust cycle, the fixed exchange rate system, capital controls, and a self-balancing global banking system, an international clearing union, all of which Keynes saw as essential complements to these policies, have been discarded and forgotten. Not only does this ensure that the rich old story has been reduced to two thin chapters, whose loss of context destroys their narrative power, but the absence of other Keynesian measures, as well as changed global circumstances, weakens the effectiveness of the remaining elements of policy. Let me give you an example. In 2009, in the hope of boosting the economy in the wake of the financial crash, the British government spent £300 million on stimulating sales of new cars. Under its scrappage scheme, if car owners traded in their old vehicles for new ones, the government, with the help of manufacturers, knocked £2,000 off the price. This lavish program was partly justified as an environmental measure, though it was clear from the outset that it would lead to a rise in environmental impacts as the materials and energies used in manufacturing new cars outweigh any likely savings from better fuel economy. Its primary purpose was to boost British car assembly plants and protect the jobs of their workers. But European state aid rules forbade such schemes from discriminating between cars made in Britain and cars made abroad. British car parts assembled only some 15% of the vehicles sold in that country, which meant that 85% of the benefit went to car plants in Germany, Japan, and other manufacturing nations. We could see this spending as foreign aid to some of the world's richest nations. The current pattern of globalization, which developed partly as a result of abandoning the fixed exchange rates and capital controls that Keynes advocated, ensures that this problem is to some extent repeated wherever Keynesian stimulus spending is applied. It might lead to a general, if scarcely detectable, global economic uplift, but the domestic impact will necessarily be weaker than Keynes intended. This issue is compounded by the phenomena of job-free growth, caused in part by the automation now spreading into almost every economic sector. Today, governments pull the starter cord, spending public money and cutting interest rates, that ignited the economy and employment in the past, only to discover that it snaps before the motor fires. Two feeble measures, removed from the rich framework of thought and narrative in which they were once embedded, have little chance of sustaining a political revival. Another issue is that the troubles that beset the Keynesian model in the 1970s have not disappeared. While the oil embargo of '73 was the immediate trigger for the lethal combination of high inflation and high unemployment, called stagflation back then, that Keynesian policies were almost powerless to counteract. Problems with the system had been mounting for years. Falling productivity and rising costs push inflation, wages and prices pursuing each other upwards, were already beginning to erode support for Keynesian economics. Most importantly, perhaps, the program had buckled in response to the political demands of capital. Strong financial regulations and controls on the movement of money began to weaken in the 1950s as governments started to liberalize financial markets. Richard Nixon's decision in '71 to suspend the convertibility of dollars into gold destroyed the system of fixed exchange rates on which much of the success of Keynes's policies depended. The capital controls introduced to prevent financiers and speculators from sucking money out of balanced Keynesian economies collapsed. Today, it's hard to find a mainstream politician in Europe or the Anglophone nations, including those who call themselves Keynesians, prepared to call for their reintroduction. We cannot hope that the strategies deployed by global finance that helped to destroy the efficacy of Keynes's measures in the '70s will be unlearned. If the soft Keynesianism proposed by opponents of neoliberalism is to amount to anything but tinkering, it has to confront a wider set of challenges than most of its advocates have yet been prepared to acknowledge. But perhaps the biggest problem residual Keynesianism confronts in the 21st century is that when it does work, it collides headfirst with the environmental crisis. The book Out of the Wreckage by George Monbiot.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So people wonder, why militias all of a sudden? How is it that all kinds of Americans are showing up with assault weapons in the Capitol building trying to assassinate the Vice President of the United States and the Speaker of the House of Representatives and stop the counting of the presidential votes, the Electoral College votes, where did this come from? You know, the last time we saw an armed uprising against the federal government in the United States was 1861. It was the Confederacy. Is this a Confederacy rising again? Well, yeah, there is a huge white supremacist element to it. In fact, I'd say it's one of the primary animating impulses. But what really got these things going, these militias going, was the Heller decision written by the opinion written by Antonin Scalia and published on June 26, 2008. And it has crazy language in it, basically begging for militias. I share it with you in a special video over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, a lot on the table here. Let's pick up some of your phone calls and see what's on your mind. Greg in Lompoc, California. Hey, Greg, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Good to hear you. I tell you, the wire is crackling today with your passionate intensity, and I just want to throw another tiny little firecracker out there.
Okay.
Do you think that the Congress people who would be willing to vote to implicate Trump won't do it because they fear for their lives?
Well, that's what Liz Cheney said 3 days ago. She said that she knew that there were Republicans in the House of Representatives who wanted to vote to impeach Donald Trump. Now, obviously, you know, this is the impeachment that I'm talking about, not a commission or an investigation, but same thing, I think. You know, it's the same people who wanted to vote to impeach Donald Trump and didn't because they were afraid for their lives. There are people who don't want their children harassed online or even in person. They don't want their spouses being stalked, confronted at the local stores. I mean, these are the kind of things that are happening to Republicans who stand up to Donald Trump. And, you know, I mean,
exactly.
So, yeah, absolutely, Greg. And it's a big problem. And it's another reason why Chuck Schumer needs to get control of his caucus and get rid of the filibuster, or at least modify it so that we can actually pass some legislation and pass these things that will disempower these neo-fascists. I just don't see a way around it.
Absolutely. And it seems to me that January 6th demonstrated that the threat was real.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And now, you know, well, we've had the FBI saying this since 2009, but Obama had to bury the report because the Republicans were screaming so loud. But, you know, the FBI came out in 2008 with a report on left-wing extremism in the United States and another report on Muslim, radical Islam terrorism in the United States. And then in 2009, just right around the time Obama became, was sworn into office, the FBI came out with a report on right-wing terrorism in the United States. Yes. And the Republicans screamed and squealed so loudly that the FBI took the report back, with the permission of the Obama administration. I think that was a huge mistake. I think that it was real then. It's been getting worse ever since. And, it's just something needs to be done about it. Greg, thank you for the call.
Getting more real.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm with you.
You got it.
I appreciate the call. James in Venus, Texas. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I just want to talk about the deal in the Middle East over there. Mm-hmm. That situation's never going to improve until they change leadership. They got to sit down and negotiate peacefully and find a solution, or that thing's never going to get done.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're talking about Israel specifically. I think that,
we can't just blame Israel for everything, or we'd be at fault for Iraq and Afghanistan. We know that ain't true. There was terrorists in both those countries.
Yeah. James, we have little control over that, and this war is a great gift to Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing, his merry band of right-wingers. I'm starting to think that maybe America should stop supporting any ethno-states, any states that are based on race, basically on race or religion. Increasing, for example, India. Modi's trying to turn India into an ethno-state. The Republican Party is trying to turn America into a white Christian ethno-state. South Africa used to be an ethno-state. China is persecuting the Uyghurs as part of their efforts to essentially create an ethno-state. It is very, very troubling. And I'll just leave it at that. James, go ahead.
That deal on January the 6th, that was a treasonous act.
It was.
That attack. It was I looked up treason in the dictionary, and that very act of insurrection and everything, that follows along the definition of what treason is.
Right, and you've got 147 Republicans who, after it happened, said, "Yeah, we're down with those people. We're still with those folks. We're still, we're what they did. That's the cause that we're fighting for. Let's overturn an election." It's nuts. James, thanks for the call. Mike in Falls, Pennsylvania. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Yes, Tom. Regarding Trump assigning Secret Service agents to his family and to Mnuchin and to Wilbur Ross, what is the authority that he had to do that? And it must be costing millions. I don't know how many agents it takes to care for one family.
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, they're no longer protecting anybody other than the immediate Trump family. But I know that just in the last month or so, it's been reported that just the Secret Service agents following around Trump's children have cost us, hundreds of thousands of dollars of money that they've spent in Trump properties, because Trump children, go to Trump properties, and then the Secret Service has to come and rent rooms and all that kind of stuff. I'm not yet ready to say end to that, because Trump is abusing it, or the Trump family, or because, even if you were to argue that they're not abusing it, just because they're very expensive. I'm frankly more concerned, Mike. There's this new book. Carol Leonnig has a new book out about the Secret Service, and
yes, I'm familiar.
I'm waiting to get a copy of it, and I want to get her on the program when we do, because it appears that the Secret Service as an organization has been corrupted is not even the right word. Just really never really run well or run right. And it was created after the assassination of McKinley in 1901, and out of an agency that was in charge of overseeing counterfeiting, and originally part of the Treasury Department, and now it's its own independent thing, but a lot of the Secret Service agents are great people and very dedicated, and do what they do at personal sacrifice, and should be applauded. But they deserve good management. They deserve a reasonable budget, and if we live in a country where politicians are continually fearing for their lives, of course we want to protect the politicians and their families. But we have to look at and ask the question, why is it that we live in a country where politicians are fearing for their lives?
Exactly.
What are the forces that are driving this? Who are the people behind this? What are the news outlets that are promoting lies that cause people to become homicidal? We have now at least 20 of these 400 plus people who have been arrested now for an attempted traitorous coup d'etat on January 6th. At least 20 of them now have claimed as their defense that they watched Fox News, or that they believed Donald Trump, or that they were consuming right-wing hate radio, and therefore they genuinely believed that the election had been stolen and they were fighting to save the American Republic and the American way of life. And, I have a hard time criticizing people who genuinely believe that, Mike. As much as I on this program and in my writings, I call these people traitors, and it's treason what they did, et cetera. And they would know that if they had a diversity of news inputs, if they actually read mainstream newspapers and watched real news instead of OAN or CNN or Fox News or any of the other, or listen to right-wing hate radio. But if I believed, and Mike, I'm guessing the same is true of you, If we believed that the Republican Party had stolen the White House, you know, if we believed back in 2016 that Donald Trump had stolen the White House, and there was lots and lots of evidence of it on television that we saw and we believed to be true, and we heard dozens of people on radio telling us that this was true, and we found thousands of websites that said this, and it was all over Facebook, and we actually truly believed that our country had been stolen, had been seized control of by a bunch of you know, in this case, right-wingers, we may well have showed up at the Capitol as well. I'm not sure it would have been exactly the same way, but we have to be looking beyond just the 400 plus so far that have been arrested for this, and start looking at, you know, who are the people who are indoctrinating these people? What is their agenda? Is it just profit? I mean, Fox News is a very profitable operation. A lot of these operations, very profitable. Are they engaged in treason or encouraging insurrection or lying to people just to make money? Is that really it? Or is there something deeper here?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And if there is something deeper here, is it possible that it is what I posit in this book, The Hidden History of Oligarchy, that, you know, there's an attempt to overthrow America? And welcome back. Let's see here. Tom in Huntington Beach, California. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, I got one question for you. My name's Tom, too. Oh, yeah, we know.
Good one.
I wanted to say, because Vance, the Manhattan DA, just announced that they're now doing a criminal investigation into the Trump Organization, wouldn't that be a violation of the RICO Act, since it goes on year after year and it's all a family organization?
You mean the Trump Organization is engaged in RICO Act violations? Yeah.
Yeah, when you think about it, because it's ongoing and they constantly use the same thing, devaluation and upvaluation.
Yeah. That's actually just plain old-fashioned bank fraud, tax fraud. Right. I mean, you know, at its simplest, and you don't need to resort to the RICO Act for that. The RICO Act, however, does have some fairly draconian provisions. It was very narrowly written to go after the mafia, but Donald Trump has long ties to the mafia. You know, when he built Trump Tower, he constructed it using cement from a mafia-associated company. It's a mostly cement building, which is very unusual in New York. Apparently, because he wanted to suck up to the mob. Or at least that's, you know, the allegation in some of the books and articles about it. I mean, you know, Cohen was apparently, and maybe Trump, I don't know, apparently involved with some mob activities around taxis and things. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff there where it's possible that the Racketeering Influenced Corrupt Organization Act, the RICO Act, could be used against Trump or against the Trump Organization. I don't think that not paying their taxes and lying to banks is probably it. I'm guessing that there are other pieces of it, and I would love to see a RICO investigation of them. You know, I think it makes a lot of sense. Tom, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. James in Los Angeles. Hey, James, what's on your mind?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Second-time caller and a long-time listener.
Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, just wanted to get your thoughts on the Supreme Court taking up the issue, the Mississippi abortion issue, just recently. They're going to be voting on that. Well, what I was thinking, I don't know what you think, but I was thinking that this is a perfect opportunity for Biden to pack the court and level the playing field.
Yeah. Boy,
it would be a good...
He has given himself a 6-month timeline. He appointed this commission, I believe a month ago, and said that they had a 6-month window to work in to evaluate what should be done about the Supreme Court and the federal courts. And he's going to wait until that comes back. The problem that is now only recently we have figured out is that a number of the members, you know, they tried to get Democrats and Republicans on this commission. Another stupid thing, you know, this stupid bipartisanship, frankly. But, you know, it turns out that several of the Republicans that are on the commission are members of or affiliated with or associated with the Federalist Society, which is the billionaire-funded organization that has been working to pack the courts and that has been supplying all of the nominees, including the wildly unqualified nominees, people like Amy Coney Barrett, and people that the American Bar Association even literally comes right out and calls unqualified, that, you know, to get them on the federal courts. And so I'm not holding my breath, James, and I don't think that Biden is going to be doing that any day soon. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, maybe if they start getting really outrageous, it'll be the thing that'll push everybody over the edge. That's what happened in 1937. They were about to shoot down the Social Security Act, and that's when the people got behind Franklin Roosevelt. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Gretchen Reynolds over at the New York Times has been compiling for the last year or so, maybe a little longer, but I've been noticing it for the last year, some just remarkable statistics and information coming out of peer-reviewed scientific journals about the benefits of very, very small, short amounts of exercise on the quality of life and the lifespan, you know, the ability to survive disease of all of us. Frankly, some of the studies were on younger people. A lot of the studies were on people over 50. And I'm talking very small amounts of exercise, like literally 4 minutes of bicycling, or 4 seconds, excuse me, of bicycling really hard on a stationary bicycle, followed by 56 seconds of just relaxing. And doing that 15 times, you know, over a 15-minute period, a couple of times a week. 4 seconds of exercise produce measurable results. It's all over at ThomHartmann.com. We got a new video up for the people who are supporters of our program. You can check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Marilyn in Sarasota, Florida. Hey, Marilyn, what's up?
Hi.
Hey.
Okay, so every time I'm listening to the news and hearing about people being arrested and charged with this, that, and the other for January 6th. Nobody has been charged with insurrection. And I can't understand why, because I looked it up quite a while ago, before January 6th. And we do have a law against it. I mean, it's not just this little thing in the Constitution. It's 18 U.S. Code S 2383, rebellion or insurrection. Right. And it's only a short paragraph. It's whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States.
And this is why the Republicans don't want there to be an investigation, because you probably have a couple dozen Republicans in the House of Representatives who are basically in on this thing. And,
I know.
We're pretty sure we know who at least 3 or 4 of them are. But I'm guessing that there's more than that, and these guys are scared to death, number one. And number two...
What's wrong with the DOJ?
Well, let's see. There have been leaks out of the Department of Justice suggesting that they're going to use the insurrection charge for the ringleaders, for the people who are involved.
Sedition, though, they're after sedition, and for sedition they need to prove conspiracy.
Right.
But for insurrection, they don't.
Oh, well, maybe I've mixed the two in my brain on the news stories.
I tend to.
Are you quite certain that there have been no insurrection charges whatsoever?
Absolutely.
Huh. I'm going to have to look into that, Marilyn. It's very easy to conflate those insurrection and sedition in your brain, and apparently I've done it. But you're absolutely right. It is against the law. It's 10 years in prison, and frankly, that is the book that could be thrown, in my opinion, at all of these people. But we definitely need to get their collaborators, as it were, in Congress. Marilyn, thank you for the call. I got to move along, but thank you very much. Appreciate it. Jim in Detroit. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to talk about the decision by Kevin McCarthy yesterday, reinforced by Mitch McConnell this morning, to not pursue with a bipartisan, congressional panel,
right.
The insurrection,
right.
And it's like the last straw. Why would we expect anything different from these people? They are literally the scorpion on our back as we swim across the river.
Yep.
They've shown us who they are. We know what they will do, and it's not going to change. I think what we need is some bona fide leadership in both houses of Congress. We need somebody to stand on the Senate floor or in the well of the Senate, and somebody to stand on the House floor and call them out as the treasonous pieces of chicken dung that they are.
Yep.
Right there. Censure be damned. I mean, what's that? Slap me on the wrist. Big deal. And what's every day you see, well, the internet reacts wildly. Who cares? Who cares? I don't care what some pundit, wannabe on the internet says about Kevin McCarthy. We need real action. In the meantime, Kevin McCarthy said, well, like you pointed out earlier, the first one, the failed coup, was practice. They're going to come back at us in 2022. They're going to come back at us and until we start to change this and turn it around and start making people realize they are the scurrilous SOBs we know them to be, it's not going to change. It's not going to change. We need Grandpa
We need
Joe.
a prosecutor. We need, now that McCarthy and McConnell have said no to a commission, we can all breathe a sigh of relief and say, okay, there's not going to be one of these 9/11 whitewashes. There's not going to be a Warren Commission whitewash. Let's get this generation's version of Lawrence Walsh or Ken Starr or Archibald Cox or Leon Jaworski, these special prosecutors who Ken Starr nearly brought down Bill Clinton, certainly set up, George W. Bush's presidency. We need a real prosecutor who is willing to actually lay this stuff out in detail. I mean, Ken Starr's report, it was like this huge report that went into extraordinary detail about the micro details of Bill Clinton having sex with Monica Lewinsky. Okay, fine. We have a precedent now for knowing when an elected official is doing something they shouldn't do. And
didn't the special prosecutor law expire? And then because of Ken Starr's abuses, the Democrats said we don't want to have another.
That's correct.
And so what do we do now?
That's why I'm saying this is going to be, it's got to be a two-step process. There's no way the Republicans will allow this to get through the Senate with a filibuster. So number one, Chuck Schumer has to round up Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin and say, you guys are going to vote with the rest of us to end the filibuster or modify it into a Jimmy Stewart filibuster. You are going to. I will offer you these goodies or I will offer you this punishment. But you are going to do this if you are going to stay members in good standing of the Democratic caucus of the United States Senate. Then he needs to do it. And then the first bill that he passes, I mean, it would be great to have the American Jobs Act and all that stuff, but the first bill that he passes needs to be an independent prosecutor, special prosecutor, independent counsel, whatever you want to call it for 2021. And we need to nail these people. Jim, thank you. Spot on. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code Tom. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Book Club. Today we're reading from Point to Point Navigation, a memoir by Gore Vidal. This is from the last 2 chapters, and we're reading from page 258. In 1961, a new president of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was inaugurated at the age of 43. With him, a new generation had taken the crown from the older generation as represented by General Eisenhower. There was triumphant talk of a new frontier, presumably to be crossed by all of us into a bright new land where the only shadow that marred the prospect was that of the hideous, murderous specter of international communism centered upon the Soviet Union, against whom JFK had sworn to bear any burden to ensure the ultimate victory of freedom, liberty, and so on. But early on, starting in 1959, under the general direction of then Vice President Richard Nixon, who had many interesting Cuban mob connections. Yes, Bibi Rebozo, his mysterious friend, was also linked not only to mobsters, but to the Cuban dictator Batista, who had been overthrown by Fidel Castro, to the annoyance of the mob, an annoyance that turned to fury when Castro shut down, if only briefly, the mafia-run Havana casinos. Elements of the CIA were soon attempting to murder Castro, who, like all Nixon enemies, was, if not yet a communist, worst, a communist dupe. The presidential election of 1960 was a close one, fought by Nixon and John Kennedy, an attractive Massachusetts senator whose father had, ironically, dealings with many mobsters during the pre-World War II period, as well as at the time of the prohibition of alcohol. The late film producer Ray Stark told me how, during the short presidency of JFK, Joe Kennedy and Frank Costello, the retired New York mob overlord, would often have dinner at Kennedy's Central Park South apartment and rehash old crimes, often in the country of a retired teamster who gave great massages. Joe's mob connections were useful to Jack in the 1960 election and could easily have saved JFK's life in 1963 had Bobby Kennedy, in the interest of building himself up in the public eyes, not started arresting important mobsters, particularly in the so-called Appalachian Mob Conference, BUST, where they had all come together to confer about the secession of the leadership of the New York mob. I've long since forgotten how I first heard of the plot to kill JFK, while I had no idea at all of the Kennedy brothers' plot to kill Castro on December 1st, 1963, until I read a recent book by Lamar Waldron and Thom Hartmann called Ultimate Sacrifice. It was assumed that the Cuban Missile Crisis of '62 had sufficiently alarmed JFK and Castro's mentor Khrushchev so that they jointly backed down, putting an end, so everyone thought, to such dangerous adventures. JFK had pledged not to invade Cuba if Castro would allow inspections of any remaining missiles on the island. Since Castro did not cooperate, JFK then regarded his pledge as inoperative. In the spring of 1963, according to Ultimate Sacrifice, more a literal than an ironic title, John and Robert Kennedy started laying the groundwork for a coup against Fidel Castro that would eventually be set for what they called C-Day, December 1st, 1963. Bobby, like Nixon before him, was in charge of what would be the most secretive operation of its sort in our history. Since the CIA had, in the eyes of the Kennedys, botched the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion, the Department of Defense was to be in charge of this adventure, which would first engage mob hitmen to assassinate Castro and then replace Castro with a provisional government that would implore the United States to come to its aid and restore order. Ours is a society riddled with plots of every kind, from, let's say, one to bribe certain members of Congress to cheat Indians off of their casino money, to the financing, often secretly, of numerous presidential elections, while simultaneously great companies like Enron cheat customers, stockholders, and employees. Yet everyone who draws attention to all of this corruption is quickly denounced as a conspiracy theorist who means to undo the great fiction that anything truly wicked, at least in the murder line, must be the work of a solitary lone nut who is simply evil. Hence the setting up of Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone crazed killer of JFK, despite his own brief but presumably accurate statement after his Dallas arrest, "I'm the patsy." Then, as planned, his being gunned down by Jack Ruby, a fellow CIA asset. Oswald as lone killer for no reason at all, and addled Ruby, a one-time Chicago mobster who claimed to be deeply worried about the stress all this must be causing the widow Kennedy. And he goes on in chapter 55. Ultimate Sacrifice describes how the Kennedy C-Day plan was penetrated by three mafia godfathers, Carlos Marcello, New Orleans, Santo Trafficante, Tampa, Florida, and Johnny Roselli out of Chicago. All three were being vigorously pursued by Attorney General Robert Kennedy, along with a dozen of their associates, of whom 6 were also working on the Castro murder case. The crime bosses then used parts of the C-Plan, a.k.a. AM World, to arrange JFK's assassination in a way that would prevent a thorough government investigation in order to protect the coup plan, its participants, as well as, naturally, national security by invoking the secrecy surrounding the C plan. The mob bosses targeted JFK twice before Dallas, once in Chicago on November 2nd, JFK called off his motorcade, and then in Tampa on November 18th. He survived unscathed. Ultimate Sacrifice reveals and details why Robert Kennedy later told several close associates the name of the Godfather, Carlos Marcello, who had ordered his brother killed. But he couldn't do anything about it for fear the Soviets might go to war. Ironic and tragic action. I recalled when over the years I'd asked why what happened at Dallas happened, I'd answer, because Bobby had broken a truce made with a mob by Joe Kennedy in 1960. The book, Point-to-Point Navigation by Gore Vidal.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I'll be getting back to your calls in a few minutes, but the first order of business, in my opinion, as I've shared with you 2 or 3 times today, should Chuck Schumer acquire the requisite determination. I'm trying very hard not to use slang that sounds pejorative. Should Chuck Schumer acquire the requisite determination to seriously get his caucus under control? Or Joe Biden pull together the requisite determination to speak to a couple of Democratic senators and say, this is what we're going to do, buddy. If that happens, number one, we need a special prosecutor or an independent counsel. We need an investigation into, I'm not so concerned, frankly, into the members of Congress and the members of the Trump administration who were involved in this attempted coup d'etat. I want a serious investigation into Christopher Miller, the former Secretary of Defense. I want a serious investigation into Bill Barr, the former Attorney General. I want a serious investigation into the people at the top, you know, the people that Trump installed, a dozen or so people that he installed in the week after he lost the election in senior management at the Department of Justice, at Homeland Security, at the Defense Department, the Department of Defense. I want a serious investigation of these folks. The second order of business needs to be to clean up our elections. So in other words, number one, let's identify the traitors and ring fence them. Prosecute them, out them, no longer tolerate their presence in our midst, you know, however you want to characterize them. And in that process, help awaken average American citizens who have been indoctrinated by right-wing hate radio and Fox News purely to make money, as far as I can tell. These people who have been indoctrinated by these people and believe things that are not true, to help them wake up. Because you're not going to wake them up. You're not going to convince them that it's not true that Joe Biden stole the election or corrupt Republican officials in Arizona and Georgia were in on it and stopped the steal and all this kind of BS. You're not going to convince them that it's not true after they've heard so many times from so many people they trust and believe. You know, the Tucker Carlsons of the world. They have heard this so many times that you're not going to get through it until you make it just, you know, incredibly obvious. Here are the crimes. And I think we've got to do a serious purge of Congress. We have 147 members of Congress. But I think it's 140 in the House and 7 in the Senate who voted with the traitors after the attempted treason, after the attempted coup. So that's first order of business. Second order of business, getting our elections under control so that they are clean. Stopping Republican efforts. 47 states now have had voter suppression laws introduced. It looks like something just a little short of 20 states will probably have them in place in time for the 2024 election. Maybe a dozen of them in time for the 2022 election. It's already happened in 4 states. And a big piece of this is getting control of dark money. Because what is the oxygen that keeps these treasonous Republicans going? It's money. Which brings us to Emergent Biosolutions. This is a company that has a giant factory in Baltimore. They are heavily supported by the federal government. The federal government is their main customer. This whole thing started back during the anthrax scare. And now I believe it was the Trump administration, I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure. The Trump administration and AstraZeneca hired them, or Johnson & Johnson, excuse me, hired them to manufacture, to kind of co-manufacture the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And you'll recall this story from a couple of weeks ago. Whoa, you know, there's like this vaccine manufacturer is having to throw out 10, 15 million doses of vaccine because they were contaminated in the assembly, in the manufacturing process. It turns out this company has been just terribly run for a long, long time, and yet they continue to get millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, your tax dollars, my tax dollars, through the federal government. Now, how is that happening? Well, let me refer you to a piece in today's New York Times by Cheryl Gay Stolberg, Chris Hamby, and Rebecca Ruiz, titled Troubled Vaccine Maker and Its Founder Gave $2 million in Political Donations. And I just want to share just a couple of short excerpts from this piece, this brilliant investigative reporting done by the New York Times. The founder and the executive chairman of Emergent Biosolutions, his name is Faoud El-Hibri. He is today appearing before a subcommittee in the House of Representatives to try to explain how his Baltimore plant ruined millions of doses of coronavirus vaccine. And here's where it gets interesting. And let me just read this sentence to you, the first sentence of the article. When Faoud El-Hibri, founder and executive chairman of Emergent Biosolutions, appears Wednesday before a House subcommittee to explain how the company's Baltimore plant ruined millions of doses of coronavirus vaccine, he will be questioned by lawmakers he and his employees spent tens of thousands of dollars helping to elect. And then they go into the federal campaign records. Mr. El-Hibri and his wife, Nancy, have donated at least $150,000 to groups affiliated with the top Republican on the panel. That's Republican Steve Scalise of Louisiana, the guy who famously ran for election in Louisiana saying he was David Duke without the baggage. No hood here. But hey, I'm David Duke. He's the chair of the subcommittee that this guy is appearing before today. 2 other members of the subcommittee have also received substantial donations from this company's Political Action Committee, their PAC, which has given, quoting now from the New York Times, which has given about $1.4 million over the past 10 years to members of both parties. He and his wife have made additional donations totaling more than $800,000 over the same period, with the majority going to Republican candidates and organizations. The federal government is Emergent's prime customer. I mean, this is, you know, in my rant earlier, I was talking about how, you know, the 9/11 Commission never looked into Halliburton's no-bid contracts. Cheney was the CEO of Halliburton until the day he became vice president. And he ran that company to the ground. They were literally on the verge of bankruptcy. And now they're worth billions. Your tax dollars and mine. 9/11 Commission never looked into it because they couldn't, the way it was set up. There were Republicans on the panel. Well, this is the sort of thing. And H.R. 1, the For the People Act, which needs to be the second piece of legislation passed after the special prosecutor law or independent counsel law, will put an end or at least slow down a lot of this kind of stuff.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And if we want to have clean and honest elections in America, we need to get the damn dark money out of the system now. And welcome back. Wayne in Seattle. Hey, Wayne, what's on your mind today?
Howdy, Tom. Hey, I'm 63 years old, and I've seen it and done it. And when somebody's bragging about how they stole somebody's this or that or whatever, you know that you can't trust them because they're going to steal your this and that too.
Yep.
And these guys that are going along, they're getting fooled. You know, these guys are evil, and they're going to these conservatives, or whatever you want to call them, they're going to get screwed over just like the rest of us are, but they just don't know it. They think that they're going to win, but they're not.
I think you're right, Wayne. What we're seeing is the emergence right now of several groups that resemble the Taliban. They claim a religion as their justification. They reject democracy. They embrace violence and misogyny. They embrace chauvinism, shall we say? Not just white supremacy, but male supremacy as well. And, there was a lot of support for the Taliban before they took over Afghanistan back 30 years ago. That support largely melted away after people saw what the Taliban was like. There was a lot of support for ISIS in some areas until ISIS took over and just started running the show the way they ran the show. And I think that if the Republicans get what they want, if these Republican-aligned paramilitary groups get what they want, we're going to have a really rough 10 or 20 years in this country of just brutality and violence against women and minorities and gender minorities as well as racial minorities. That's how it's going to
happen to them. It's going to happen to them and their children and their mom and their dad and their aunts and uncles. It's going to happen to everybody.
Ultimately, yes, ultimately. But over the short term, they've got this heroic notion of this white ethno-state, the United States, where it's run by white Christian men. And, just like the Taliban was like, okay, we're going to run Afghanistan by Muslim Arab men, period. Full stop. Nobody else need apply, right, for the job. Women not allowed, people who aren't Muslims not allowed, people who aren't Arabs not allowed. And it's increasingly, it's looking like the same thing to me. And we've seen how this has played out in several different countries over the years. For that matter, we saw how it played out in Europe in the 12th century with the Crusades. When the Pope, when France was going through a crisis, and the Pope and the whatever his title was, the Emperor of France at the time, got together and said, okay, let's start the Crusades. It'll distract people from the problems at home, and it did. But it's like, how did that work out for us, right?
Well, Sherlock Holmes' arch enemy, right?
Yeah, Moriarty.
Moriarty, right? These guys are super smart, and they're playing us like a bunch of fools. They really are.
I agree.
And they are super smart, and they know what they're doing, and they're playing a chess game, but they're really good at it, and the average person isn't.
And it's all about power and money. It's all about power and money. Wayne, thank you for the call. Well said. It's 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be back in just 1 minute. And I'll be picking up your phone calls at 202-808-9925. There's a lot on the table. How do we deal with these folks? How do you deal with your neighbors who have bought into this stuff, or your friends or relatives. And, hey, what do you think about a vaccine passport coming to your state like we have here in Oregon? Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So remember back in 2020 when in California, Uber and Lyft were pouring all kinds of money into Prop 22, which basically would allow them to continue claiming that their drivers weren't actually employers of Uber. They were actually contract workers. They were all independent small businesses, and therefore the company didn't have to pay for unemployment insurance, didn't have to pay for workman's compensation if somebody got injured, didn't have to offer them any health insurance. In fact, basically couldn't even do it. And there's a whole bunch of other benefits that are associated and protections that you actually get, state and federal protections that you get as an employee that you do not have available to you as a contractor. Well, it passed because of millions of dollars from Uber, and now the fallout is happening. Companies across California are starting to fire their workers and telling them, we'll hire you back. I give examples in our new video over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, you know, so much going on. It's really quite extraordinary. People all over Twitter are Donald Trump Jr. is tweeting about, you know, his dad's denial of being a criminal. And people are tweeting, flip before Ivanka does, which raises a really interesting question. You know, which one of the Trump kids is most likely to flip on their dad? Because they're all, I mean, you know, if the Trump organization is doing what it sure does look like it's doing, and what a whole lot of reporters, I think David K. Johnston has been one of the best to really go into this, you know, is pushing, is pointing out the various crimes, not just the bank fraud, not just the tax fraud, you know, not just the college fraud, not just the casino fraud, not just the hotel fraud, but you know, just this whole spectrum of criminal activity that they are involved with, you know, bribery and threats and it's just mafia-like activity. I don't know how Don Jr. and Ivanka and Jared and Eric and Lara are going to stay out of jail. My guess is the first to flip will be Eric. He's like the least likely to have the intellectual capacity to try to, or the network of allies to be able to come up with any kind of reasonable defense. But I could be wrong. You know, it might be the smart one. Might be Ivanka. She is just as sly and ruthless as her father, but you know, has an IQ that's probably at least 20 points higher than her father. And she's been stashing millions out of all these various scams so that when daddy goes down, she's going to be in good shape. She's got a lot to protect, and she's got a bunch of kids to protect. So we'll see. Anyhow, picking up your phone calls, Judy in Healdsburg, California. Hey, Judy, what's up?
Hey, good morning, Tom. You know what? I feel like I'm rescuing you because I heard your rant a few minutes ago, and I know how you feel. I feel the same way, but can I give you a positive outlook?
Please. Yes, go for it. You have to listen to the phone, not the radio.
Okay, here it goes. It's open up to a little bit of light. What I really feel is going to happen here is that how long can the Republican Party go on with all this corruption? I mean, it is vile. It is corrupt. I mean,
well, they're 40 years into it, Judy.
What?
They're 40 years into it.
I know, but there's something in the wings, Tom, and I'll tell you what it is. It's the progressives in the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. It's the Alexandria Cortez people, Cortez, and that there is going to be, Tom, believe me, there is going to be a new Democratic Party. that's going to challenge the old Democratic Party. The Republican Party is going down the toilet. It really is. How long did Hitler hang in there? 12 years, right? I mean, you can't go on with such lies and corruption. It's all dark. So I see a light at the end of the tunnel. I really do.
I do, too. And I think that transformation of the Democratic Party that you're talking about at the federal level is already largely complete. It's, the House Progressive Caucus represents just short of half of all the members of the House. And, they have several members in the Senate or allies in the Senate. And I think, another couple of election cycles and you're going to see the Democratic Party being kind of officially the Progressive Party. And one of the things, ironically, weirdly, unexpectedly, that is promoting this and provoking this is the Biden presidency. Joe Biden coming out essentially as a progressive. Like, hey, this is my, finally after, 5 tries to become president, he got it. And now he's going to make the most of it. And God bless him. And what I'm seeing now, I'm hearing from people I'm constantly encouraging people to join the Democratic Party, their local Democratic Party. And so I get feedback from people, sometimes on Twitter, sometimes whatever. I get feedback from people saying, I tried, I went in and there was a bunch of kind of, old farts who just like their little clique, and how do you do it? Well, just persist. Those little cliques are going to start falling apart. And the old Democratic Party of, let's get along and go along and, it's just like a club. And, they're being replaced by a whole new generation of activists. And, my rant yesterday or the day before about the schools, the Republicans are trying to take over our school boards all across the country because they're freaked out by the millennial generation and they want the next generation coming up to be raised as good conservatives. And, I'm starting to see Democrats pushing back at that on the local level, saying, no, I'm going to run for school board. So it's, I think I'm with you, Judy. I'm with you. Thank you for the optimism. Thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. I'm absolutely with you. Carl Frisch, who has been a guest on this program many times. I was a guest on his podcast a couple of months ago. Carl's running for school board in Virginia. Carl Frisch, Democratic consultant, heavy hitter. He's running for the school board. It's important stuff.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
In fact, Sean tells me he won his election. We should get him on, let him crow about it, and talk about the importance of it. Absolutely. We'll be right back with more of your calls.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by Alan J. Lichtman, and it's titled Repeal the Second Amendment, The Case for a Safer America. This from the introduction, titled A Book That Must Be Written. On April 28, 1996, 28-year-old Martin Bryant stopped at an inn near his home of Newtown in Tasmania, Australia, and shot to death its 2 owners. He then drove to the former penal colony and tourist attraction of Port Arthur, where he lunched at a cafe. After eating, Bryant pulled from his sports bag a semi-automatic rifle with a 30-round magazine that he had legally purchased through a newspaper ad. With no provocation, he began firing at patrons in the cafe and its gift shop. Before the police stopped his shooting spree, Bryant had murdered 35 and wounded 18 others. His motive remains unknown. There were people everywhere, bodies, said witness Lynn Beavis. I thought at the time, being a nurse, I've seen dead people, I've seen blood, I've seen things like this, but what I saw in there, nobody but perhaps a soldier would know what that was like. The leadership of a shocked nation responded to the Port Arthur massacre, not with thoughts and prayers, but with decisive action. The country's conservative-led government rebuffed their gun lobby and its American ally, the NRA, to adopt comprehensive national gun controls. In a 2015 broadside labeled Australia, There Will Be Blood, the NRA charged that those regulations, which Australia significantly tightened as of 2002, have, quote, robbed Australians of their right to self-defense and empowered criminals. If the NRA was right, America, with its lax control over firearms for alleged self-defense, should be one of the world's safest countries, certainly far safer than Australia, where criminals presumably evade gun controls to prey on defenseless, law-abiding citizens. Yet in the latest reporting year, gun homicides claimed 14,542 American lives, compared to 27 in Australia. And all homicides took 19,510 American lives, compared to 222 in Australia. Since the NRA issued its warning, firearm homicides have declined in Australia, while soaring by 3,534 in the U.S. An American is now over 30 times more likely per capita than an Australian to be murdered by a gun, and 7 times more likely to be murdered by any means. If we had rates comparable today to Australia's, some 14,000 American lives would have been saved from firearm homicides in 2017 alone. By the gun lobby's twisted logic, Japan, which has one of the world's strictest gun control laws, should be drenched in innocent blood. Yet out of a population of 127 million, shooters in Japan murdered only 3 persons and injured only 5 in firearm assaults throughout 2017. Australia and Japan are not outliers. As compared to residents of our closest peer democracies in the G7 group of nations plus Australia, an American in 2017 was over 20 times more likely to die from a gun homicide. The gun lobby would have you forget that gun deaths are not limited to murders. In 2017, 23,854 Americans died from gun suicides, 64% more than were killed in firearm homicides. As compared to the peer nations, the 2017 per capita rate of firearm suicides in the United States was 7 times higher, while the rate of suicides by other means was 40% lower. These other democracies all have strict firearm regulations. None has a constitutional right to keep or bear arms, a distinction the United States shares worldwide only with Guatemala, whose gun murder rate is the 3rd highest of some 195 nations worldwide. Why has America lagged behind the democratic world in protecting its citizens from needless death and injury? The culprit is not spending by the NRA on campaigns and lobbying, which other pressure groups exceeded. The real problem is that which gun control advocates fear to name, the Second Amendment. Led by the NRA, the gun lobby exploits a historically defective, perverse reinvention of this amendment to inspire their grassroots supporters, sell guns, and provide constitutional cover for their opposition to making us safer by regulating firearms. The competing movement for gun control has floundered in response to the gun lobby's triumphant marketing of the Second Amendment. Gun control advocates have righteous zeal and noble motives, but lack a winning strategy. Instead of forthrightly refuting the lobby's bogus claims, the gun control movement has instead fallen into the trap of lamely insisting, we support the Second Amendment, but we also support responsible gun control. With such a self-defeating strategy, the movement can never win. It plays on the gun lobby's home turf and fails to rally the American majority that favors stricter firearms regulations. It provokes only scorn from a gun lobby that dismisses yes but assurances as rank hypocrisy, and it ignores the clear history and the true meaning of the Second Amendment itself. The movement for gun control must strike hard with a new strategy. Repeal of the Second Amendment is not only right, but realistic. It would break open the political logjam and open a path for the comprehensive national gun control and safety measures that have eluded the American people for so long. None of these measures would confiscate firearms or stop Americans from using guns for hunting, sport shooting, antique collecting, or legitimate self-defense. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. These form the Second Amendment. Book Repeal the Second Amendment by Alan J. Whitman.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. We're trying to provide the very best content that we can for you at Hartmann Report and over at ThomHartmann.com. And on Hartmann Report, every day, 6 days a week, I write an op-ed. Very often they're my rants, also for the radio and television program. And it's ad-free, commercial-free. It's free. You can sign up. It'll get pushed into your email box. Check it out at HartmannReport.com. And, of course, over at ThomHartmann.com, we have our weekly video that we put up every week that does a deeper dive for people who are members of our program of ThomHartmann.com. And the one this week is about this Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, SIGAR, their new report that almost 20 million Afghans are on the verge of starvation and nobody's talking about it. Check it out at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and picking up your phone calls. Jeff in Kenosha County, Wisconsin. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Interesting times we're living in. Thank you for taking my call. Somebody called previously about the question if congressmen's lives were in danger. And there's a video. It's actually a 60 Minutes episode called Under the Influence. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, you will like it. This is in regards to that despicable Medicare pharma bill of, 2005?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The one that banned Medicare from negotiating drug prices, so Medicare is getting stripped of hundreds of billions of dollars a year by the pharmaceutical industry, or at least tens of billions of dollars a year.
Exactly, and that's why this is so important, too. 1,000 lobbyists descended on Capitol Hill to make sure this went through. The vote went along party lines, and when they could not get the votes, first of all, they stopped the clock. They violated the House rules, but they surrounded the holdouts. And when they pulled back, the holdouts were visibly shaken and in tears.
These being Republicans?
Yes. And when they were asked about it, they were asking Billy Tozan about it. And he's a very kind of scary person himself.
Yeah, he was on the show trying to justify that. Billy Tozan. Yeah.
And they asked him. Yeah, they asked him about what about these holdouts? The people were physically shaken, when they pulled away, and he just basically whitewashed it and said, well, you know what, it's he fell back on the old cliche and everything. It's like sausage being made and stuff like that. But he said that he was asked what was being said to these people, and he just said they were being talked to.
Yeah.
And left it at that.
Well, that's
and
what I'm saying.
I urge everybody to watch this video.
Yeah, Chuck Schumer needs to take a lesson from Billy Towson, or from whoever was running that operation.
And it's not only the masters, the lobbyists that have to be served. And I learned this from you too, Brian Baird. We got to do away with trading. Insider trading and stuff, because that interferes too.
It absolutely
there's a lot going on, so are people's lives in danger? I believe so.
Yeah.
That's all I had to say.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
You said it very well, Jeff. Thank you very much. Jeremy in Douglas, Arizona. Hey, Jeremy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. How's it going today? Just want to say up front, love you, brother.
Thank you. Back at you.
Yeah, the reason I'm calling is just kind of a point of frustration and a pet peeve. One of your previous callers touched on this, and it comes down to the technical definitions of treason, sedition, and insurrection.
Okay.
And I think using the correct term is incredibly important. So sedition can be as simple as I create a plan to overthrow the government, I share it with somebody else, sedition. Or I hinder the enforcement of laws, or I seize, take, or possess any U.S. property contrary to its laws. Insurrection is simply sedition plus violence.
Acting it out.
Yes. And once you have an act of violence, then you can describe it as insurrection. Apparently, only the Attorney General can bring forth charges of insurrection. And it's Title 18, Section.
Well, that would be because it's a federal law. State prosecutors can't do that.
Right.
I mean, it's not only the Attorney General who could bring it forward, but the Attorney General would not. He would have to not disapprove of it.
Right. He couldn't object to it, and then it could.
Right. If he objected to it, it wouldn't happen. So, you know, but he doesn't have to be the guy who initiates it. It could be initiated by any federal prosecutor.
Okay. Good to know. Now, when we use the word treason, when we mean insurrection or sedition, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. And we throw the word treason around all the time, willy-nilly, when treason is very specific and it's outlined.
It's giving aid or comfort to your enemies during time of war.
Or participating in war against the U.S. government with one of those countries. Yeah. So, I mean, we can simply think Benedict Arnold.
Well, Jeremy, if you accept the notion that Donald Trump was brought to power in the United States with money and resources from Russia, Saudi Arabia, any other countries that might have been involved in this thing that later, you know, loaned Jared Kushner $1 billion,
right,
then
but that's
there's your foreign power.
It is, but it's a supposition and a presumption. Until you can actually show proof of that, you cannot say that there.
I think the Mueller report gets us 4/5 of the way there.
Perhaps.
But I understand what you're saying. So in other words, what you're saying is that this is just so everybody knows. And an earlier caller actually read this on the air. I'll do it again. This is 18 Code 2384, seditious conspiracy. If two or more persons of any state or territory in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possession any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof, they shall each be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. That's seditious conspiracy. That's actually that's not the law that she read.
Right, and no, that is. It's Title 18, 2384, and it is. That's an act of sedition, not treason.
Yeah.
So it's one of those really, really weird things where it's a specific legal thing, and
I get your point. I get your point. What Richard Nixon did when Lyndon Johnson said to Everett Dirksen, Everett, this is treason. You know what? Well, here it is. Actually, this is LBJ.
Here's the latest information we got. The agent says that they just talked to the boss in New Mexico, and that he says that you must hold out, just hold on until after the election. We know what Chew is saying to them out there. Yeah, we're pretty well informed on both ends. Now, I'm reading their hand, Everett. I don't want to get this in the campaign. That's right. And they oughtn't to be doing this. This is treason. I know.
And that's the President of the United States talking to the most powerful Republican in the United States Senate, saying this is treason because Nixon was conspiring with the government of South Vietnam to blow up the peace talks that LBJ had negotiated in August of 1968. So there's your foreign government. That's what you're talking about, Jeremy.
Right. So when you can draw a clear line to that, when you can say definitively.
Right. He had the wiretape. He had the wiretaps from the CIA.
Exactly, right. And
I'm reading their hand, Everett.
Yeah, right. So if the Mueller report would have given us clear indication,
here's the thing. Bill Barr told Robert Mueller that he could not look at anything prior to the election.
Well, I technically, yeah, of course, he was denied the ability to do that. But it's one of those weird things. It's kind of a, we call it a gray area. But
no, I absolutely get what you're saying. And if your request to me is not to use the word treason unless I'm talking about participation with a foreign government, I will take that under advisement, Jeremy. But I do think that calling people who engage in seditious conspiracy, which is the actual title of the law, calling those people traitors is not inappropriate. Would you disagree with that?
No. Traitors to their government, to their people, that's fine. They're just technically they're not treasonous. The people that showed up.
And now the distinction that I think is important for us to make is those people who were traitors, who engaged in seditious conspiracy because they genuinely believed that America was being destroyed, versus those people who did so and encouraged others to do so because they wanted to be the destroyers of America. And I think there's two separate groups there. And I think that we need to start having some conversations about separating them out. But Jeremy, thanks for the conversation. You're spot on. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around. It's 45 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann program. Fair and only slightly unbalanced. And welcome back. Lori in Cashiers, North Carolina. Hey, Lori, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. The other day I was listening, saw Joe Biden give a speech, and I'm going to call it the wrong thing, but it was going to start returning taxes to households with families for their children at the rate of $250 a month, an automatic deposit.
Yes. It starts
now.
now.
I wanted to find out, is that going to start in June or July?
No,
and I'm also
it was supposed to start this week, Lori.
This week? Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I just think, is it just because it's good news that I'm not hearing about it off of the rooftops in the United States?
Yeah, probably. If something's on fire, the media is there. If it's not on fire, and this is kind of the opposite of that, this is, the Biden administration taking care of America's families with kids. It's not so much
I know
news.
that. I'm not naive, but I'm encouraging you to talk about it more so that more people know about it.
Okay, well, you just did that, and a whole bunch of people just heard us.
There's not enough good news out there, is there?
I'm with you. Okay. In fact, we should start a good news beat on this program. Lori, thank you for the call.
Yay!
Very nice to hear from you. Have a great afternoon. Steve in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good afternoon, Tom. Glad you got your tooth fixed.
Yeah,
and that's important. And I think I remember back you had, I believe it was Dr. Tang from D.C. on your show a few times. That was kind of nice.
Yeah.
But anyway.
That was Kim June, or June Kim, excuse me, was his name, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. That was nice when you did that.
He was a good guy.
But anyways, I wanted to salute Oregon, the state of Oregon, for this passport vaccination program. I think it's wonderful. I've been fully vaccinated since end of February. And, we have passport programs in this country already. You and myself were already members of TSA PreCheck. And, in fact, we're heading to Wisconsin later on this week. And I'd like to know that everybody on that plane would be vaccinated, with passports, so I think it's a very important thing, and I think all businesses and states across the country, it should adapt it.
Well, I'm wondering if they're going to start enforcing this at the Portland airport.
It'd be interesting to see.
It's an indoor building, and that's what he said. You got to show proof of vaccine. It's frankly, I doubt it, but that they're going to enforce it there, aggressively anyway. But who knows? I mean, this is a fascinating story that has not been covered, seriously by, the local media. There's just one story in the Oregonian. I listened to local public radio this morning for about an hour, while I was getting dressed and stuff, and I didn't hear any mention of it. So I don't know where it's going, but it's a good start.
Very impressed. Thanks, Tom. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Good talking to you. So, we'll see. Oregon is the first state in the union to officially say you really should show, not you have to, but you really should show proof of vaccine to get into a building. There's no criminal penalties. You don't get arrested. But they're explicitly saying that businesses and government agencies, if you want to walk inside a building, those businesses should make sure that you are actually vaccinated. You should show proof of that. Interesting times. And by the way, the governor Kate Brown, said that when we hit 70% vaccination level, we'll be close enough to herd immunity that she will suspend that order. We'll see how it plays out. I'll keep you up to date. Stick around. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Hey, we have a couple of special things over at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com. Of course, at HartmannReport.com, every single day, well, 6 days a week, Sunday accepted, I write a rant about an issue of the day that I think is important. Louise and I work on these together. We get them out typically around 6 in the morning Pacific time. And you'll find that at HartmannReport.com. It's free. You can sign up for it. There's no ads, whatever. But also over at ThomHartmann.com, we have a video every week for the supporters of our program. And the one this week is about how Wisconsin is trying to remove, in fact, they just got permission from their Supreme Court to remove 188,000 people from the voting rolls because they haven't voted in 4 years. This highlights the importance of getting to know who is your state representative, who is your state senator, and communicating with them regularly. It's all over at HartmannReport.com and ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. A lot going on, and oh my, Edward in San Diego. It says you disagree with me, Edward. You wanna rant about something? What's up?
No, sir, I do not disagree with you, and I thank you for taking my call. Mm-hmm. No, what I wanted to bring up was the fact that in last year my son was canceled for making a white power gesture while he was working. And, of course, he wasn't making a white power gesture at the time. What he was doing was snapping his fingers, and an individual behind him construed it as that, because he was driving by a Black Lives Matter protest. He was never doing what he was accused
Edward,
of doing.
your complaint is not with me. I get that you feel that your son was done wrong, but what's the point you're trying to make? Or did you just want to complain about that?
Well, we need help. Yeah, we need help, Tom, is because the corporation that fired him never gave him a fair hearing. They just assumed that the caller, who happened to be white, by the way, was correct, and we need someone.
This is why we need unions, Edward.
Exactly why we need unions, and that's why I'm always talking up the unions. And the issue with this union was that because he was on probation and he had been working there 9 months, they said they couldn't help. Yeah, and the corporation had told them since 1984 they've had an agreement that they don't get involved with probationary workers, even though the union is representing.
This is a unionized company, but he was on probation. I get it, Edward. Point made. Absolutely, point made. Thank you very much for the call, David in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Hey, David, what's up?
I'm calling to point out that there's another authority that can charge for sedition, and that's the UCMJ. People who are on active duty.
Uniform Code of Military Justice is. Go ahead.
Yes. People that are on active duty in the reserves of the National Guard or active duty in whatever service are subject to the UCMJ, and if they took part in January 6th, they can be held accountable under the UCMJ, and it involves some pretty harsh outcomes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I mean, it includes the death penalty, and I haven't heard anybody talk about holding these people accountable, and there have been at least a couple that I've heard of that they know took part.
Yeah, I've seen several news articles about active duty military being busted for January 6th, and you're absolutely right. The UCMJ is far more draconian than is civilian. Thanks for putting that into the conversation, David. I'll keep my eyes open. If I see anything, I'll report it here on this program. Mike in Minneapolis. Hey, Mike, thanks for calling. What's on your mind? Thanks for listening to AM 950.
Man, it's just like I got the rug yanked out from under me there with the last call, because my question was about if someone participates in something like that and they are a member of the reserves, either through retirement or volunteerism, or they're the National Guard, or they are active duty, what are the penalties that can happen to them? And I suspected that death was one of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know what else. But I know that when Mama Military wants to thinks that it's justified, they can ruin your life so many different ways after the fact. So
and when you join the military, you give up your constitutional rights. I mean, that's like part of the contract. You literally lose your First Amendment right to petition the government for redress of grievance or for free speech, or your Fourth Amendment right of privacy. I mean,
most civilians don't know. Most civilians don't know or understand that when you are on trial in the military, when they charge you, you are guilty.
Until proven innocent.
Until proven innocent.
It's like the Napoleonic Code. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and so that's something. I mean, if you participated in it and you're a member of the military, you really should have thought this one out a little bit better.
Yeah. There you go.
I really think, you had the training that lets you know what to expect. So, good luck with you.
Yeah, I'm with you. Mike, thanks for the call. Mark in Philadelphia. Mark, we have a little less than a minute. You got a quick point or question?
Yeah, let me get your legal opinion on something. For 4 years, we heard from Trump and his friends about the attack on religious liberty.
Right.
Well, who's religion? Suppose you're an atheist. Isn't atheism a religion, or Darwinism, or agnosticism, or religions that believe in dinosaurs that were here 500 million years ago?
This is where the Church of Satan has actually been doing some really cool stuff. We had them on this show a couple of years ago. They were saying they were being discriminated against. Your point is well made, Mark. And, they're trying to create this white Christian ethno-state. And, enough already. Enough already. And you're right. Marginalized religions do not fit into the Republican definition of religion, sadly. And it's a point that we need to make more often. Thanks so much for being with us today. Get out there, get active. We need you now. Call your members of Congress and tell them to end the filibuster. Tag you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code Tom. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.